Okay, well, I have it as 5 o'clock right now on my iPad. So we will call the Round Rock Independent School District Board of Trustees regular board meeting for Thursday, April 16th, 2020 to order. This meeting was duly posted and we do have a quorum present. I'm going to give Jennifer just a minute to pull up pictures of flags so we can do the pledge. Right, so if everyone can stand and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you, Jennifer. All right. Item D1 was public comment. We did not have any citizens sign up for topics on the agenda. So we will move on to item E1. Dr. Flores, monthly financials.
Yes, I'll just go ahead and have Dr. Audix give us that monthly financial.
Okay. So good afternoon, President Weir, members of the board, and Dr. Flores. I'm going to share with you our financial results through February 29th of this year, starting with the general fund. So for the month of February, we had total revenue of $38.8 million, total expense of $36.1 million. On a year-to-date basis, total revenue is $413 million, which is running right now $6.5 million more than budget. That'll trend closer to budget by the end of the year. A lot of this is just timing piece. Our current taxes are running through February year-to-date are $2.1 million above budget. The appeals, because there have been a lot of prior year tax appeals, so that's $800,000 worse than budget. The low interest rate environment is causing investment income to be $500,000 less than budget. So, currently this is showing that we're $6.4 million. In forecasting this out, my expectation for the year, we should beat our revenue budget, but not by a significant amount, but we are planning for the revenue to be better than budget for the year. On the expense side, year to date, our expenses are $283 million, which is $11.6 million better than budget. As did in the board update, the negative variances on the school administration, that one being $800,000 over budget. That's really the only one that I'm trending to expect to truly be over budget for the year. Bottom line, we just under budgeted that from what our run rate would have been given the pay raise that was put in place. So we will be over budget on that line item. On function 53, the data processing, that one at being over by $859,000 is mainly a year to date, or is mainly a timing issue. I've checked with Mark Gaypart. He's planning to come in at his department budget, real close to his department budget, and the payroll for technology might be a little bit over budget, but nothing significant. So it'll be pretty close to break even for the year, maybe slightly over. And on function 99, the final expense there of other government charges, that's TCAD and Williamson County Appraisal District. Those are quarterly payments, so it's just a timing issue in terms of when we made the payment last year and how we set up the budget. But that negative variance will come better than budget on that for the year. So just to kind of give context on that, and I'll reference this again when we start going through next year's budget discussion here in a little bit. But I'm forecasting expenses for this year to be around $427 million. And the logic to that is straightforward. If you look at our year-to-date expenses at $283 million, so that's the first 8 months that we've lived, okay? And then if you look at our monthly expense of $36 million, 36.1, if you took 36.1 and multiplied by 4 for the 4 remaining months, and you added that to the 283, that would give you a forecast of 427. and the budget for the year is 446. So that would say that expenses are on line to beat budget by around $19 million. So we're in a favorable place. And with the coronavirus, all that kind of thing, and it's just too early to tell in terms of, okay, obviously expectation, we're going to beat water, we're going to beat electricity, all those kind of things. But, anyway, I'm real comfortable to say that we're going to beat budget in the neighborhood of around $18 million for the year. But just to give you context of the stepping stone between how we're doing this year and our starting point for the budget proposal for next year. Then finally, in terms of fund balance, we ended February with total fund balance of $338.2 million. In terms of the food service results for February, we had revenue of $2.2 million, expenses of $1.4 million. On a year-to-date basis, have revenue of $13.7, which was running $700,000 less than budget. Expenses year-to-date are $11 million, which was $700,000 better than budget. So the all-in got a positive bottom line for the year at the end of February at $2.7 million. What's going to happen to us? We operated half of February or half of March. So on a go forward basis, it's kind of like, hey, what's going to be our reality for food service for the rest of the year, given that, after spring break, we didn't kind of feed any kids other than, some of the things that we did in terms of handing out lunch and breakfast in the parking lot, but significantly different than what our normal run rate would be. We're going to still incur the payroll cost, which is about $700,000 a month, but the current fund balance at the end of February is $13.1 million. So even if one of the problems we had with the fund balance was literally needing to spend down fund balance to meet the TDA requirement. So we're going to obviously burn a little bit of fund balance between now and the end of the year as a result of the coronavirus, but nothing that's in anywhere alarming, because even if we had no revenue for 3 months and we just incurred a real expense of $700,000, that would be $2 million. Well, we're running $2.6 million better. We've got a $2.6 million bottom line right now. So we kind of end the year kind of where we started. So anyway, give you some context there. Then in debt service, we have revenue for the month of $9.2 million, no expenses because we make payments on our debt service requirement payments on February 1st and August 1st. Well, we made the February 1st payment in January, so it didn't hit the February financials. Revenue for the year is $101.6 million and expenses are $104. The main reason that revenue is less than budget is, again, lower interest rate causes other local revenue to be less than budget. And then on the federal funding piece, when we issued the debt back in November and we did a refunding on our 2 Build America bond outstanding, that had a revenue component to it that went away when we did the refunding. So we won as a district by doing it, but that's the reason that in doing that refunding, we no longer receive that federal revenue piece. So that's the backdrop on how we're doing year to date there. Our fund balance at the end of February was in the INS debt service fund was $102.6 million, and our next debt payment will be August the 1st. In terms of our bonds, we had interest income for the month of $772,000, for the year $3.7 million, and expenses for the month of $1.2 million, and year to date of $26.8 million. That fund balance has $523 million in that. And then capital projects, expenses for the month were $391,000. Year to date is $5.6 million, and a current fund balance at the end of February of $18.4 million. So I'll take a pause there to see if you've got any questions about the monthly financials before I ask Jennifer to pull up the budget presentation and we start going through that. So are there any questions about the monthly financials?
Mr. Math?
Yeah, just a quick question. You skipped over this. I just wanted to come back. We're looking at February, which is pre all the COVID stuff. For March and April, You mentioned water and electricity as being a savings. I assume security would be a savings as well. Do you have maybe a guesstimate of how much we're saving, based on the current situation per month?
Right. Bottom line, no, I haven't run the detail on that. What I'm really kind of waiting on, because it's just hard because we literally haven't even paid the bill yet. So it'd be hard. I mean, I could do something as simple as saying, well, a month is this much, and so 2 weeks would be this. I'd rather get the actual bill and then say, here's that trend out. The other dynamic, 90% of our cost is payroll. Now we're going to continue to pay people, but the back and forth is that the people that actually, like, hey, we said, hey, these are non-exempt employees we really need them to come in and do whatever we're asking to do. Well, we started off over spring break and that sort of thing, paying a premium of 2 times their rate of pay for those people that came in. Now, starting this week, that went to a 1.5 times premium. So on the one hand, hey, we're paying everybody, but we're also paying that premium for some people. On an offset, it's like transportation. Well, transportation, typically runs quite a bit of overtime. So the overtime goes away and you have savings. You don't have substitute teachers other than those that were already on contract to sub for they were already signed on to cover a given class or classes for a given period of time. So you have that reduction, but you've got moving pieces really at a fundamental level. Big picture, we're $18 million to the good. This is going to be, kind of icing on top of that cake. But I don't expect it to be, it's going to be a $5 million win or something like that. But I'd rather kind of get me a reality figure and then trend off of that reality figure. But literally right now, I don't have any payroll information or actual, here's my utility bill payment to kind of give me a run rate expectation to work off of.
Okay, thank you.
I saw Ms. Vessa, and then Mr. Moses, you'll be next.
And I'm really sorry. I should have put this in my questions before, and I was just, when you were talking, it just occurred to me. So I understand if you don't have an answer, but one thing that was really emphasized at the TASB by the government relations team over at TASB is that there's going to be settle up because we're working off of current year values, that we have to plan for a settle up with TEA at the end of the year. Have you started conversations with TEA about that? And if so, what's your expectation?
Right. The settle up piece really has, isn't going to drive in terms of the expectation of the amount of revenue and that sort of thing that we're going to get. What drives our funding for this year and kind of for any year is going to be attendance drives the show. How many kids do you have? And then, times the basic allotment and all that sort of thing. One of the things that's going to be different under the scenario that the kids don't actually physically come back to school this year is that, because normally, you get paid by attendance. So you measure the attendance every 6 weeks and you say, okay, here's that number. Attendance is tracked every day from my role. I'm looking at the attendance on a 6 weeks basis and projecting out our revenue off of that. So we have actual statistics on, hey, we've submitted our ADA through the first 4-6 weeks. Now there is no ADA for the 5th 6 weeks and potentially for the 6th one as well. But what the TEA has said is, look, what they're going to have districts do in terms of estimating is to say that, okay, you're going to use what you had in the first 4-6 weeks. And then for your 5th and your 6th 6 weeks, it's going to be based on what was the trend last year for your 5th and 6th 6 weeks. That's what they're going to use as an estimate, or we're going to use as our estimate out to the future. So we've already done that work, like Wayne Curry has done it. I've looked at it. The bottom line to it is, like when I say we're going to come in close to the revenue amount, it's already factoring in that expectation of how we've done through the first 4-6 weeks, and then what our history was with our attendance in the 5th and 6th 6 weeks, and what that would yield, lead you to expect your revenue to be based off of that.
Mr. Moses?
Thank you, Madam President. And really, Kenneth, Dr. Flores, this question can be answered in a board update at some point. That's fine. But just, and if I remember right from our investments, we're still primarily in the pools. And I was just wondering if we're looking at other options right now besides the pools to get a little more diversified and see if there's any more yield to be gained by staying in a fund, inside the Public Funds Investment Act, clearly, but any other opportunities out there.
Right. And so, and here's just to kind of give you a heads up if you haven't heard already, Wayne Curry's been our debt and treasury manager for the last 22 years. He's after tomorrow's his last day, and he's going to be going to Liberty Hill. But what, my last conversation with him is literally, okay, we're in a very low environment, and it's sort of like, look, do you go in the pools? And there's the most reasonable way to think about this is if you're in the pools, every day I can choose, hey, today I'm in, tomorrow I can move in or out. I'm not locked in for any given period of time. And so your choice is typically on a yield curve. The longer you go out, you get incremental yield for that. But given how low the rates are right now, it's like that deal of, well, do I bet that the sun is going to come out sooner rather than later? Or do I lock in for a long period of time at a very low interest rate? And then, I'm going to earn slightly more potentially than the pools right now. But that's kind of where we're at. And so given that Wayne's leaving tomorrow, we've got the job posted. We're gonna, got to get the next person in and kind of, and then start having that conversation and cover that ground, with the new person that comes on. Right now, that's kind of our mindset.
Thank you.
I had one quick question. Did anybody else? You may have already answered this. My day of being a middle school teacher was a little rough today. And I was just curious on line 23 on our general fund. You said that was going to be over because of salaries. Can you just explain that a little bit more?
Right. So literally when we checked in, because it's like, okay, what happened? What put us over? The logic that was used in terms of, because from a process, just like what we're going to do this year, if we do a pay raise type of thing, that HR has to run through and say, okay, for 7,000 people, here's what that new, amount is. Then it comes over to our side of the house and in finance, and they run that to where when you get your financials, hey, every person is ultimately coded to an individual function. So, a teacher is the first line on function 11, all that kind of thing. It goes by function. Ultimately, you get it on a spreadsheet and you look at it and you say, does what we're actually budgeting pass the smell test of what we would actually expect it to be? And so what was missed from a logic piece is that when we did the proverbial smell test, we were looking at what was the original budget last year for function 23. And then given that we knew we were going up on pay raises, what was that number? And so we were using that to say, look, that ought to be in line with what we adjust the budget to be. In reality, last year, our original budget we adjusted that budget over the course of the year, and so we missed in the smell test the fact that we needed to account for that adjustment that went on over the course of last year. And so we, our actual, when I say I'm forecasting us to be, over budget on that, is in line with what our actual expense was last year with the pay raise that was given. It was just a mistake in terms of how we set up the budget.
Thank you.
Yep. Are there any other questions on that? Otherwise, I'll ask Jennifer to move us to the budget presentation.
Madam President, are we ready for the budget presentation?
I think we are. I do not see any other hands up for questions.
All right. Before Kenneth gets started and as Jennifer mans the booth, I just want to, ask, that we take a moment just to say thanks to all allow me to take a moment to say thanks to all the great Round Rock ISD employees who have demonstrated such courage, dedication, commitment through these, tough times and throughout the pandemic. And as we know, over spring break, we've had many or a small army of people working to transition to online learning to ensure students that would have access to meals, to communicate essential information to our community, to ensure staff still being paid, and an entire litany of things that needed to be done. So I really am thankful for staff during an unprecedented situation. You know, our teachers, administrators, counselors, and ed assistants have shown incredible innovation and creativity as we've transitioned to at-home learning, and many of them are also taking care of their children at home at the same time. As Kenneth mentioned, food service continues. We are providing more than 2,500 meals a day to students who need them, and we've provided over 9,000 Chromebooks to students and families. We continue to do that. In fact, principals are going door to door, finding out who needs, a Chromebook, and making home deliveries at this time. Our Families in Transition is working with the most needy of our students, the most vulnerable. Those are the ones that every day is a struggle for food, shelter, clothes, and yes, technology to stay engaged. So that's working. So the list goes on. But as we prepare to discuss this budget, and also in that budget will be part of the compensation plan for next year. I also want to thank this board for being so bold last year. This board voted to give raises over and beyond what was recommended as a result of, House Bill 3. And I want to acknowledge that to remain a destination district for students and family, we have to be a destination district for the best talent in the state of Texas. And I think we've got that in the classrooms and those serving the classrooms every day. I know that, this year, I think that when we give as he gives this presentation, I think you will agree that our teachers, our staff, and everyone deserves more, but we know this is not the time. But during these uncertain times, I want to also give thanks to Kenneth and his team and those that have gone before him with their fiscal management. It's the only district in the state, our district, to have a AAA rating from Moody and Fitch, and we're in a position to be able to do something that recognizes the efforts and accomplishments. For this reason, we will be recommending a 2% salary increase for the upcoming year. I wish, I've said it before, that it could be more. It needs to be more for us to be competitive, but we do feel that this is appropriate at this time. And before I close out, I just want to, again, I know that this is tough, a budget presentation today, but I feel good with where we are. We understand also that some board members and others have concerns given the unknown impact that the global pandemic has had on our economy, not only obviously local, but state, national, and worldwide. But I want to remind our community that our funding for next year is not affected at this time by the current situation, and that we are in solid standing. This district has been, and that's been one of the fortes of this district for so many years. And I thank the trustees and those that have gone before us to be putting us in that situation. So again, we can provide this 2% increase and still put money in our fund balance. That's what Kenneth will be showing, which our fund balance is a savings account, is an envy of many districts. So just to put it in perspective, when we talk about this overall budget, the overall compensation that we'll be talking about today represents 2.7% of our entire expenditures. This is not a move that will break Round Rock for the future or the next biennium. But what we cannot afford to do is undermine our workforce and lose talent to neighboring districts. He gave a name and a person just a while ago, and we could be more specific, but I think we could talk offline on that. But after our schools reopen, which they will, we would need to start mitigating those learning gaps that have been accelerated during this time. That would be more important than ever before. So we're going to need the talent individuals that are on our campuses, on our district offices, in our warehouses, everywhere. And I know this board wants what's best for students and staff in our community. And I understand the concerns. But as he presents, I hope that what we see is the benefit of a leadership team whose members have individually given decades of experience in public education. And we know where we need to invest, and we know how to make what decisions that are fiscally prudent and in the best interest of this district and this community. I've never been more proud to serve this amazing district. And with that, let me turn it over to Dr. Oddix for the budget presentation. Dr. Oddix.
So before you get started, real quick, I'm looking at the link on the agenda here. When I click on the second one, budget final, it does not bring up anything. I have it from the last one I have is April 13th, so a few days ago. Is there a newer, updated version, or is that the latest? If you click on that link online, it just goes to
There's a newer one. There's one as of today at 2 p.m., Chad. It's in Board Docs.
Okay, it's not on the present. It's not on the agenda, so I'll look for it. But
Oh.
okay,
Yeah, in Board Docs it worked.
Yeah, that's where I'm at in Board Docs.
okay. I'm looking at Board Docs here. So let me go ahead, and if I don't find it, I'll let you know. But go ahead. Thank you.
You're going to put it up on the screen, right?
Right. Yeah. Jennifer's
I see it.
going to drive the show, but she's got it up on screen. And so, and if you would, Jennifer, go on to the next slide. And so kind of as a backdrop, obviously for the board, we've each had a conversation. I've met either individually or collectively with a couple or anywhere from 1 to 3 of you in 4 different meetings over the course of the first few days of this week. But even though this is ground that we've already covered, I'm going to go sort of on a much more methodical basis, given that this is for the public, and I want to be sure that they're understanding the logic and where the numbers are coming from and all that sort of thing. So starting with the assumptions, the tax rate that's in the budget proposal for next year is based on a compression from the current rate on the M&O, which is for the general fund, is currently at 97 cents. This would compress that to 95.61%. So the tax rate would be going down. The overall, as Dr. Flores referenced, we're going to be recommending an overall 2% pay raise increase, and that we'd also contribute to cover that when we give that increase to the employees, if the board approves it, that we'd also cover the increase in the cost of medical to where we wouldn't turn around and take that money back out of the employee's paycheck. Then based on the Templeton Demographics projection for our enrollment increase for next year, we're budgeting that ADA increases by 500 students, average daily attendance. Then since the basic allotment was budgeted, the state, when they do the budget, where we're doing a budget every year, the state does their budget on a 2-year basis. And so next year will be the second year of the state's budget, and the basic allotment, which drives our funding, will be unchanged next year from where it is right now at the 6160 per WADA, or weighted average daily attendance. Then it's early on in terms of, obviously, with all that's going on with property values and everything. We're far from certain on what the property value increases will be. I know that I was on a phone call with Chad when Williamson County did an initial rollout of an estimate earlier this week, and we'll have Travis County coming up soon as well in terms of an initial estimate. But for right now, for planning purposes, we're assuming that property values increase by 4%. Then, given the low interest rate environment, we're projecting that will stay very low next year. And then within next year's budget, even though we're adding 500 students, there'll be no additional staffing in the budget. We'll actually be decreasing the amount of staffing payroll cost. And we'll get into that, and we've covered that ground with the board already, but we'll see that in a second when we go through the line by line on the budget. And then finally, the plan to implement several efficiency ideas to help reduce our cost. So those are the main assumptions in our budget for next year. And if Jennifer, you'll go to the next slide, please. So in terms of our calendar, this are the main dates. We've obviously the last time that we had this conversation was 2 weeks ago at the board workshop on April the 2nd. Two of the fundamental differences between that meeting and tonight's meeting is based on the feedback the board gave us that night, was that in that proposal 2 weeks ago, instead of like I said on the first assumption, that had the tax rate compressing by over a penny. When we talked 2 weeks ago, we were going to let it compress, but keep one of those compressed pennies on the revenue side, because that impact of that 1 penny is worth $6 million. Well, in the revenue forecast that we're going to be in the budget that we're about to talk to, that penny went away based on the board's feedback of, hey, given everything with the environment and Corona, that now's not the time. I don't want to use that penny, and so we took that out. The other thing that will be, and this will be when I get done answering questions, I'll give the mic to Annette, and she'll go over, and we've got Tasby online as well again to speak to the board's other request was give us some additional scenarios of what pay raise increases, what those price tags would be if we did different scenarios. So I'll let them speak to that. And so then after, tonight is about presenting the latest budget to you, but then also bringing our recommendation for the compensation change. And then in May, we've got another PIB committee meeting, got a tentative board workshop on June the 4th. We're going to be asking the board to adopt the budget on June 18th. So the budget will be adopted on June 18th. The actual tax rate will not be adopted until September 27th. So that's our budget calendar. So Jennifer, if you go to the next slide, please. So in terms of the revenue piece, starting with line 1, so that each line is numbered down the left-hand side. And for context, each one of these numbers are all in thousands. So when you see that first number of 363,891, that's $363 million of current year property tax collection. That is budgeted to go up to $375 million. So basically that little over $11 million increase is driven by the assumption of the 4% increase in property value, as well as the decrease in the tax rate. On line 2, the impact of not compressing the tax rate, had we done the like that 1 penny, that was worth $6 million, but we took that out. So we're literally on this budget assumption for next year, we're letting the tax rate fully compress. So that assumption is there. Then line 3, the delinquent tax collections, we've adjusted that down based on the run rate and the expectation for next year. The penalties and interest is unchanged at the $700,000. On line 5, the reason for that large decrease is within that line of other local revenue. A lot of that is interest revenue. We budgeted $6 million of interest investment income this year, given that now interest rates are real low. We're expecting to only get $4 million this year. Next year, for budgeting purposes, we're literally coming close to zero on the assumption of interest income for next year. So that's a $6 million budgeted decrease. We're, on the other hand, we'll get $500,000 more in E-rate, or expect $500,000 more in E-rate revenue than this year. So the net of that is a $5.5 million decrease in budgeted revenue. On line 6 with state revenue, you see that that's going down, and that's driven by 2 factors. On the one hand, the fact that we're budgeting 500 additional kids we'd get more revenue for those kids. But the fact that as we raise more money locally, then that reduces the state's contribution. And so the net impact of our property values going up overrides the impact of the additional funding that we'd get from the additional students. So we've got a decrease in state revenue from 36.2 to 32.5. No change to lines 7, 8, and 9. And then on the teacher retirement, that's up slightly just because that's a percent of, it's a pass-through from the state, and it's just driven by payroll. So as payroll changes, that number changes. But you'll see that exact number that we're seeing on line 10. You'll see it here in a second when we go to the expense side. You'll see an identical number on the expense because the state's literally giving that money. It shows on our income statement as revenue and also as expense. So with that, on line 11, you see that from a budget perspective, the increase in revenue for next year is budgeted a $2 million increase. Okay. So Jennifer, if you go to the next slide. So the next slide, this is everything on here is expenses. And I'm going to start with the 1920 column and take you to line 32 just as a starting point in that, we budgeted for the year we're living on our fiscal year runs from July 1 to June 30. So our budget for this year, we budgeted to have a deficit of $7.4 million. Now, like I just said when we did the monthly financials, is that if you look at line 34, I'm forecasting that we'll do better than budget by $18 million that I referenced in the monthly financial update. So, hey, we budgeted to lose 7. We plan to come in $18 million better than that. So that's like making $11 million for the year. When we adopted the budget last year, one of the other things the board did back in June of last year was that we established the capital projects fund so that we could tell our story on 3 sheets of paper, that when we talk about our general fund budget, that's just operating cost. It doesn't include any capital cost for long-term projects. So by establishing that capital projects fund, when we're buying equipment and things that aren't operating cost, that goes to a different fund. And the intent was from the design was that, hey, each year as we hopefully beat our budget and we'd have extra money, we could use that money to fund the capital projects fund to keep replenishing that fund. And so the financials that we just went over for February have a fund balance at the end of February of $18.4 million. So we haven't spent near what we thought. We were kind of thought originally we'd be on about a $10 million a year burn rate. Now we haven't lived all of the year, but so far, we haven't pulled much out of that fund. So we could transfer $8 million from our earnings from this year to make sure that fund was healthy when we ended this fiscal year. And then even in doing that, it would be a deal of, we started this year with right at $218 million in our fund balance. So by doing all of this, we would end this year at $220 million. So we'd end with more money than we started with on the general fund, and we'd have the capital projects fund in a very healthy place. So I wanted to say all of that to give a starting point in terms of, because it's always a good idea when you're talking about next year's budget, is to stand on firm ground in terms of, okay, what do we think this year is going to do, and use that as the stepping point to step off of to say, okay, what's different? What's our difference in the expectation for next year basis, compared to this year? So now in terms of the expenses for the 2021 column, on line 14, the salaries and benefits, the starting point is simply that was our budgeted payroll for this past year of $364 million. Then line 15, that TRS, that's the same number we just talked about. You see it on the expense side of the $21.4 million. Then on line 16 of the staff changes, that's what I referenced earlier and as we've had a whole bunch of conversation with this, so I won't go into the detail, but that $8 million is basically comprised of 2 things. One, sort of a tightening of the budget on the payroll, like the positions in payroll. We're not reducing any existing person or anything like that, but we are we're not asking the board to give let us budget for additional positions for the additional students that are coming on. We're going to take the existing approved allocation and still be able to, educate those kids with that. And then with staffing efficiencies and changes in how we staff things, that's the other $4 million. And hey, given the coronavirus and virtual learning, all that kind of thing, that's not that is fully established. That's work that's still being done. But we are confident as a management team and leadership team that we can deliver on that $8 million reduction in staff change. On line 17, this is the poster child for tonight in terms of the compensation change and the recommendation. And so you see that our recommendation is overall, as Dr. Flores said, a 2% overall pay raise plus market adjustments, equity adjustments, so that the overall goal as a district is that we get, regardless of what position you are in the district, we want to try to pay you as close to a competitive wage as what we can do. And so that's the work that TASB's done and will do each year to try to meet that requirement, that regardless of where you work for in the district, we're going to pay you as competitive as we can. So that's that piece. Then we're also, plan to give credit for years of service. And then, we've historically always had trouble getting enough substitute teachers. This plan raises the substitute pay by $25. The cost of that's $1.5 million. Next up is the bilingual stipend. We're always having trouble recruiting bilingual teachers. This would increase that stipend from $4,500 to $7,000. That costs $400,000. And then another piece, and all of this is driven by, trying to get the best thing we can do. Most important thing in meeting the board goal of improving the education of the kids is having the teacher in the classroom with the student, having a high quality teacher that's in the classroom every day. Well, one of the things that's important to do that, and it's a change in what our current board policy is, and we've talked this through with the PIB, but currently in our DEC local policy, we cap the number of days that when a teacher retires or an employee retires, that we will pay them for. So if I was a teacher and I've worked for the district for 25 years and okay, it's time to retire, but I've got 100 days saved up. Well, right now we've got in place a cap of 80 days. If an employee has more than 80 days, there's literally no incentive for them financially not to just start taking days off. Well, when they take days off and they're not in the classroom, the education of the child is going to suffer. So the recommendation on this is to take that cap off. Literally, hey, whatever days you have, I'll pay you for every day. Okay. Then next up is that the rate of pay currently is very low in terms of what we're offering an employee for their day. For example, a teacher with over 20 years of service would only get $90 for a day. We're recommending to increase that to $250 so that if I'm the teacher and I've got a bunch of days, I might shrug my shoulders and say, hey, for 90 days, I'd rather have the time off and not be there. But if we make it 250, then I'm about to have the rest of my life off, and every 4 days is $1,000 I can stick in my pocket. There's a carrot that ought to get, the attention. And so that's the intent of hey, that's what we want. We want to incentivize what we want. And so we would take an exempt employee to $250 in terms of buying back their local days. And for a non-exempt employee, we'd increase that to $150 a day. So that's that recommendation. All in on that is $12.1 million. And ultimately, like when I get done and Annette will present and Amy and Aaron from TASB, they'll give you all the different scenarios. As Dr. Flores referenced, our recommendation is going to be that whatever we do for all of our employees. So that's kind of that piece. On the medical insurance increase, the plan there is to increase our district contribution from $400 a month to $415 a month, and that would cost the district $1 million. Then on line 19, the mental health services, we started that as a district last year, and in getting information from Dr. Amy Grosso, we currently have 4 counselors that we contract with through Bluebonnet, and in next year's budget, the assumption is to have 5 counselors to be at a full run rate. The reason that, well, hey, if we're adding 5, how can the cost go down? Is that in talking with Bluebonnet, we're currently the only district that doesn't have allow or take advantage of the fact that we could bill this if the extent the student has insurance that covers counseling service. Everyone but us as a district is billing back if that child has insurance. We're billing that to the child's insurance coverage instead of eating that cost ourselves. Hey, if the child doesn't have insurance, we're going to cover that. But the net impact of that is we can expand our level of service, but still not increase the cost that's coming back to us. And so that's the reason, that's the logic there. So on line 20, our total salaries and benefits increases with these assumptions from 396 to 401 are basically $5 million. Next up on allocations, I've combined the campus and the library. They used to be like 2 weeks ago, they were on 2 separate lines, simply combine them into one line. Chad had asked at that meeting that in years past, the board had seen at a campus level the detail by campus on what the campus allocation was and the library allocation. So later in this slide deck, that's there for you to see. Then on line 24 with the departments, that budget is budgeted to decrease from 44.2 to 43.4 million. Two things that are going on at the department level is that, as the board's aware, we're transitioning in 2021 to where by the end of 2021, all of the SROs are expected to be on our payroll. So over the course of the year, we'll transition, and literally, the starting point, according to Jeff Yarborough, is that the expectation is we'll start in July with contracting for 24 SROs and having 7 on our payroll. So we'll have a total of 31 SROs. That'll allow us to have full coverage at our high schools and middle schools. So we're adding, SROs from this year where we had gaps in coverage. So we'll have 31 officers throughout the year. And as we add officers, the contracted volume will fall to where by June of next year, we'll have all 31 officers will be on our payroll. And so that's a piece where, that's happening on that side. Then on the transportation side, as the board's aware, we started the start of this calendar year contracting with Gold Star to give us help to add drivers and cover routes because we've been chronically short drivers. This would allow them to, as we can't, if we can't get drivers and they can, we'll use them so that hopefully, when we start the school year in the fall, we'll be able to have enough drivers for all of the routes that we want to have for the kids. So the impact of all of that is 43.4 million. Don't have as I shared with y'all this week, I don't have the department budgets detailed out ready to give to you because we literally sent those out to the departments. We've got the allocations out. So the allocations total the 43.4 that we're looking at here, but we've sent that out to them to start building their individual detail piece to it. So that's where we are in terms of that process. Then on line 25, that's the shared cost allocation for operating costs with food service. Still working on that component, just using as a placeholder that number doesn't change year over year. Then line 26 reflects a reduction in a budgeted amount where in our current budget, that $1.2 million is comprised of 2 buckets, $600,000 for strategic plan, $600,000 for innovation initiatives. In next year's budget, we've zeroed out the innovation initiatives and we've reduced the strategic plan from $600,000 to the $500,000 that you see there. So all of our expenses in total on line 30 are going up less than 1%. We budgeted $446 for this year. We're budgeting $450 million for next year. So what that then gives us on line 32 is a budgeted deficit of $9.4 million. Okay. But you see on line 34 that I'm forecasting us to beat that budget by $10 million. So here's the logic on that is linearly very straightforward. We just talked about that we expect our current burn rate this year to be $427 million. Well, when you look at lines 17 and 18, that's really what we're planning to add to the cost structure based on this recommendation. So we're basically, if the board approves this, we'll be adding $13 million to our cost structure, and that 427 would go to 440 million. Well, you look at line 30, our budgeted expenses are 450. So if I burn 440, but I budget 450, I should beat my budget by $10 million. That's the reason that I'm saying forecast better than budget by 10 million. So even though I'm budgeting to lose, or we're budgeting to lose a little over 9, the forecast would say we should beat that budget and basically be break even in our reality. Then, just like we've talked about earlier with the transfer to capital projects, we could still transfer $5 million over to capital projects next year, given that, as we've discussed with the board, we've got a property value audit going on that they've already completed it for 2016. They're working on it for 2017. Basically, we're planning right now to get $2.5 million of additional revenue from each one of those audits. So if that comes to be, that'll be $5 million. And so with all of that logic and those assumptions, we would have started next year with $220 million in fund balance, and we'd end with $221 million of fund balance. So let's just call that door number 1. If you did the administration's recommendation, the expectation of all of this would say we'd end next year with slightly more money than what we started. If the board said, okay, bottom line, we're going to vote for no pay raise and no change in medical, then the fund balance would be $234.2 million. So that's the budget component. Jennifer, if you go to the next slide, please. This just speaks to, okay, when we say the recommendation of the 2% raise, because, as we've talked all along, the importance of, hey, we are, Round Rock has the reputation of being the destination district, and the belief of us is that, that because of the talent that we have, and a poster child for that is what's just happened. It's a pretty amazing feat to think that, 3 weeks ago, or over the course of 3 weeks, we went from teaching kids just like kids have been taught, for my whole life, come to school, teacher teaches you, you go home, to in a 3-week turn on a dime and say, okay, we're going to start educating over 50,000 kids each day in a virtual learning environment. Hats off to the amount of talent that takes in order to do that. And hey, that just singles out, the piece there. You can just talk on and on. Technology, hey, get 9,000 Chromebooks out to the students. Jan and her crew with Aramark, hey, find out a way to start feeding the kids, not only the students that can come to the schools, but fit, hey, transportation, take those meals out to the homeless students, payroll, figure out all this, HR, figure all this out, what it means to people's pay rates and premium pay and all this kind of thing, factor all that. Jenny communicated. You can just talk on and on and on about the strength of a team that's necessary to pull something like that off. And so, as I've said the first time I met with you, I absolutely believe if I could only get one thing from you to win, would be let me have the talent, because I'll take what comes as long as we have the talent to win that battle. So what you see on this slide is simply where we're at currently this year, that we're 5th out of 11. A year ago, before as Dr. Flores referenced, the board approved a huge, biggest pay raise in the district's history, courtesy of House Bill 3 last year. That allowed us to move from dead last, of starting teacher pay to be 5 out of 11. What we know, though, is that, okay, that's as we sit right now. What's going to happen for next year is that other people are, and like Pflugerville is a prime example, they've already approved their pay raise for next year. So they've committed to a 3% raise. So we're $700 behind them. With that 3%, basically that adds $1,500 to that starting wage. Now, if we did nothing, we'd be $2,200 behind them in terms of pay. And so that's the dynamic. If we don't do anything, then we will lose ground to those that increase their rate of pay. The other piece that's real important, and I'm going to spend some time on this because I really think it's important, is that right-hand column is critical for us and for us as a community to understand, in that the difference in the tax rate. Because right now, you see that 6 of our surrounding communities have a higher tax rate than us. What I'm going to show you in a few slides is the way the world used to be, and that was in our benefit, and the way the world is now. And the easiest way to explain that is that before House Bill 3, we had the benefit with the way state funding worked of we would get the basic allotment, okay? But then we got to stick on average at $25 million of additional revenue in our pocket, because with the way funding worked, you got to reap the benefit of the extent that your property values increased from last year to the current year. That increase in tax revenue, we got to keep. That was $25 million of incremental revenue. So the districts like us that are wealthier districts per kid have a higher property tax base. We won. We had more money than our competition did. So, hey, all the credit in the world to the rearview mirror, all the people that did the work that built that fund balance and all the decisions that were made. But one of the things that we benefited from as a district was, it's kind of like playing with a stacked deck. The deck was in our favor at that time because we got to keep that benefit that was bigger than districts next door to us that didn't have as much property wealth as we did. Okay. So that's who won the race in years prior. On a go-forward basis, given House Bill 3, now the reduction from House, like when we get the 6160 for the basic allotment, the state says, I'm only going to give you what you can't raise locally now based on your current year value, not your prior year value, your current year value. So now we don't get any benefit of the fact that our values go up. And so now the ones that have the competitive advantage is simply the ones with the highest tax rate. Okay. And so we've got 6 surrounding districts that have a higher tax rate than us. And I'll show you what that means in money terms in just a second. But if Jennifer, you'll go to the next slide, because where this slide compared us against the local districts, as we've talked about before, if you look to try to compete at a state level and pay competitively so that the student coming out of, the teacher coming out of college, hey, they can go anywhere. And hey, early on, the odds are greater. Once you have roots, you could maybe make the argument someone's not going to maybe move, but right out of the gate, talent goes where they're incentivized to go. And so when you look at the state level against peer districts our size in the Dallas, Fort Worth, and Houston area, we're dead last there. But our tax rate is also dead last. 8 of those other 9 districts all have a higher tax rate than us, anywhere from 2 pennies to 10 pennies. And so, Jennifer, if you'll go to the next slide. The final piece is that, I'm from the private sector side. I've spent 10 years being a CFO of different districts, but before that, I've been wired to make a profit. Okay, so that's driven by how do you run it more efficiently than it was before. Always find a way every day. You do that work. Well, here's the measuring stick for us in terms of, given that 90% of our cost is payroll. Efficiency that's the way you measure efficiency. If our cost structure is no different than others, districts 85 to 90% of their cost is payroll. Well, in terms of that, this is a ratio of ADA, basically students in the numerator, teachers in the denominator in that first column. So for every teacher right now, the average teacher for us has 14.1 kids, and that's both the regular ed teachers and the special ed teachers all in as a district. We average 14.1. We're 3rd out of 11 districts. So we're near we're right up at the top. The average of all the other districts is 13.6. So our teachers have on average a half a student more than our competition does. When you take beyond teachers, you take everybody that works for the district on an FTE basis, we average 7.5 students per FTE. The average of all districts around us is 7. So we're a half better on the FTE side. That's one measure. Another is every year we do the first report to the board, and TEA has a measuring stick that they measure efficiency, and they gave us full credit for what our admin cost ratio was, because they said for a district our size, our admin expense ratio ought to be less than 8.5%. We're less than 5%. Okay. So this isn't a situation where, hey, if 90% of my cost is payroll, and I look at this, it's not a thing of, man, if we just be as staff as efficiently as our surrounding districts, we'd have the money, we could take money out of our cost structure so that we could put that into a higher rate of pay. So from an efficiency lens, we're never going to stop trying to do this better than what we're doing it right now. But we're currently, with what we're doing, and this was as of last year, we were 3rd out of 11 districts. Okay. So Jennifer, take me to the next slide, please. Okay. So this is, as I referenced before, the incremental revenue that we got in each of the last 5 years from as values went up. We got to keep that in our pocket. So, that range anywhere from $20 million in 15-16 to $30 million in 16-17 for an overall average of $25.5 million a year of incremental revenue, versus like if a district didn't have any increase in property value, we would have gotten $25 million more than what they did in that year. Okay. So take me to the next slide, please. So this then compares for this fiscal year in 1920. Like I said, locally, 6 of the other districts have a higher tax rate than us. And where 2 pennies might not sound like a lot, those golden pennies are worth $6 million to us on each penny. So the districts, had we had the tax rate that these other districts have, we'd have anywhere from $12 million more if we were like Pflugerville, to Hutto, which has 10 more pennies than us, That's $41 million of additional revenue. So that's how the additional revenue works locally. Then if we go to at the peer district, if you'll go to the next one, Jennifer, here's the peer districts. And like I said, those other districts, 8 of the 9 all have a higher tax rate. They're getting anywhere from $12 to $40 million of additional revenue. That's what's driving the show in terms of why they're able to pay more than what we're able to pay. Okay. And if you'll go to the next slide, please. Okay. And then these last slides, and I won't go through detail on this. I've shared this with the board, but this is literally the allocations on these multiple pages of the campus allocations, as well as the library allocations for each of the campuses. So that's what I've got for you, and I'll take a pause, and if there's any questions, I'll answer them, and then turn the mic over to Tasby and to Annette.
Oh, okay. Mr. Moses.
Thank you, Madam President. Could you or somebody just give a couple of examples of the innovation initiatives that are proposed being cut?
Okay. And what I'll yield to, because that's really Mandy and Dr. Presley, and so if they would have the devil in the details on that, if they'll skip that,
or if they can provide just a few examples that get in a board update on the next budget meeting, that'd be great.
Okay.
Ms. Fessa?
So I have some questions back on the assumptions page. So that's slide 2. So these are the foundation of all the numbers, as these assumptions. And one thing that concerns me that I brought up with you that I just wanted to bring up in the public meeting too is our assumption that our enrollment, our ADA, is going to increase by 500. My concern there is that when we go back to school in August, that this virus won't be a thing of the past. It will still be with us. And assuming that we go back to having instruction at schools, there will be a certain number of families and students that say, I think we're going to homeschool. I think we're going to look into an online option. I don't think that we're going to, because of our concerns, I don't think we're going to enroll this year. And so I talked about, okay, if those things change, how does that impact our bottom line? So if we don't get the 500, let's just say we lose 1%. That's a very conservative estimate. That's another 500. Wouldn't that mean that we would lose $8 million of revenue that we're expecting?
Are you saying we lose 1,000 kids in total or 500 kids in total?
So we don't get the increase of the 500, and then based on our current enrollment, 1% of our current enrollment decides to do an online learning, homeschool, just because of the situation. So if we saw a 1% decrease and no increase, then the assumption that the impact of that change would be a net loss of $8 million.
That would be a true assumption on the revenue side. On the expense side would be a thing of hand on the dial in terms of, when it comes to staffing piece, and Annette can speak to this, but we're a large organization with 7,000 employees. In any given year, there's hundreds of teachers that will hire or will leave. And so that's a kind of a hand on the dial. If that really happens, then, for one, you do what you can. The reality is simply you do what you can this year. And then on a go forward basis, the following year, as people leave then, and, you make the final adjustment at that point. What we're at, in just our reality is there's a world of uncertainty with what's going on. There's no question about that. Wouldn't for a second argue it. And, we can talk through the night. We can talk the rest of the week about, all the different things that could happen. What we've got to do as a district, and what I've always done as a CFO that's worked, is literally each year you get people together and you simply communicate, okay, here's what we know, and here's how much, here's the size of the cup. Now, what's the highest and best use of those resources that we have? We've only got this much money. We know what we want to achieve from an education piece. How do we make all the adjustments that come into play so that the end result is we give the best education to the kids that we can? And I can tell you because that's what I did at a previous district. And literally the process that we put in place here is to replicate that process of literally you get with all the principals, you get with the department heads, and you say, look, here's where we're at. Here's how much revenue we expect. Here's what we've got to achieve. Now, what's the best way to do it? What are the ideas? Give me ideas, and then you quantify it, you vote on it, you ultimately get agreement. This is what we think is the best way to achieve that. And in that prioritization, it's like one of those things you never forget. There was a group, hey, you would think everyone's always going to say, number one is give me a pay raise, okay? There was literally a year where more than anything above a pay raise, staff, teachers said, we need whatever. We need staffing for the kids of this, so much more. Give me that before you give me a pay raise, okay? So you get real honesty, and you get and when I interviewed for this job, that was literally the question that was asked. Hey, you're a new CFO here. The scenario we want you to talk through is if we had to reduce the budget by $20 million, got a $20 million shortfall, what would you do? Okay. And my absolute approach, and what I told them and tell everybody, is I didn't come and say, hey, here's what you do. Here's every single line item. Here's the cuts you make. Because under that scenario, you've got one mind working. And I know a lot, but the best thing about me is I know what I don't know. And I know when it comes to the education of the kids, there's people that they've spent their whole life, they know it, but that's what they're hired to do, is to produce that for them. So listen to them. And my job is to be the scorekeeper, to say, here's the size of the cup. Their job is to tell us, y'all ultimately will tell us, here's how much money you have. With the tax rate, with the budget, all that sort of thing. Then Dr. Flores, with this much money, we want you to achieve these objectives. Then it becomes a team approach. You simply say, this is how much we've got. What are we going to do about it so that we give the best education to the kids that we can?
And I think just to add, Trustee Vest, that's a great question, because I think every superintendent in the state of Texas and even nationally is asking probably the same question. The luxury is that we do have daily contact, and I missed today's conference with TEA and Commissioner Morath, but that's a discussion, and obviously online and capturing online options for us, as we talked about earlier. We were able to adjust to that if we need to ratchet that up, and then if there's online option where they get captioned for student participation, student involvement, student enrollment. Obviously, that's something that's going to be discussed not only here, but statewide. And the last thing I'll say, if we do lose 500, if we did, then it'd be something that I would be coming to this board to say, board, we're losing students at a rapid rate. It is time to now start looking at options that allow for us or as a result of policy, for example. And again, the policy could be looking at our transfer or allowing transfers in, specifically with companies that might all have employees that have residents or in our boundaries, which we know those companies. And if they have 100 or more employees or whatever, however this board would decide, but it can come back with opening and allowing for students from other districts depending on. So for us in Round Rock, I don't think, as bad a scenario that would be if we lost 500 students, I think we could recapture with some aggressive ways of doing it. And I've done the previous district, but nonetheless, that's something that I think is definitely a good question.
You're muted, Corey. Oh.
I don't know what's wrong. Oh, wait, no. Okay, am I back?
Yes.
Okay, so I have another question, and it's one that I brought up before, and but all right, we have to plan that. I mean, one thing that our district is we're self-insured. Okay, we don't pay an insurance company, a health insurance company, to insure us. We collect, contributions. We have a budgeted amount of contributions from our own budget, and then we pay the medical bills that our employees accrue. So we're looking at a global pandemic. Right now, we have, I only know of one employee that has been infected, but we can anticipate that based on projections that we're going to have a certain infection rate within our staff. That's just going to happen. We could say we have about 7,000 employees. Let's go super conservative, 5%, right? That's 70 employees that, I'm getting it confused. That's 350 employees that get infected. Okay, so we know, or symptomatic, because there could be a lot more that are infected, but they're not symptomatic, so we wouldn't even know that they were infected. So then we know about those that are symptomatic, about 20% require hospitalization. That's what we're seeing. I've done some research. The average hospital bill, or up to this point, is about $30,000. So if you, if just the cost of hospitalization of just having, a 5% symptomatic of that's only 350 employees being symptomatic, and only 70 employees then requiring hospitalization, that's actually over $2 million in additional costs. And that is super low. A 5% infection rate, man, we would be so blessed to be that low. So I'm just trying as a trustee to think through these scenarios and how this virus impacts us, both in our terms of our attendance and terms of our healthcare expenses. And I know that, we can't know what's going to happen. These are, we just don't know, but we can make some good, we can plan for what's likely. And I don't think that the things I'm raising are unlikely scenarios. That's all.
Okay, did anybody else have any questions or comments for Dr. Audix?
I just want to say thank you, Dr. Audix, for putting this all together. I know this is a very challenging time with the unknown, so we're doing the very best we can to make some best projections. So I just want to thank you, especially the fact that you are a little undermanned right now with Rosanna leaving, as well as our team members. So I want to commend you for this. Thank you.
I appreciate it. I mean, we've got a great team, and it's just, I've loved working here, and if we can keep this team together, we'll do great things.
All right. Actually, we had one other agenda item before we get to Annette real quick. Do we want to go ahead and do that one real quick? Which is F3, the BBI local policy. Mason was the only one that I actually got feedback from.
It seems like it might make more sense. This is Amber Feller. It seems like it might make more sense to go ahead and talk about the action item F1 as it relates to the budget and everything we just talked about before really switching gears and talking about the policy.
Okay, so do we want to, we'll do both action items then and then come back to the other discussion? Okay.
I mean, that's just my recommendation. It just seems like it flows naturally into the discussion we just had.
Is that okay with the other trustees if we? Okay. All right, then why don't we skip to action item F1?
Okay, so action item F1, good evening, President Weir, trustees, and Dr. Flores. We are proposing that you approve the Chapter 1 probationary term and non-Chapter 1 contracts, the ones that were submitted to you.
Annette, just to be clear, I don't know if you said chapter 1 and it was just cut on the,
No, chapter 21.
thank you.
Yeah, I said chapter 21, it probably cut off. So it's chapter 21 probationary, chapter 21 term, and then non-chapter 21 contracts for the employees that were submitted to you, located on board docs.
Are there any questions from trustees or comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion. Hang on, my computer just messed up. Soon, 1 second. Sorry.
I have it up.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, go
Sorry.
ahead.
Froze on me for a second. I'm trying to get it.
You can go ahead.
I move that the board approve the renewal of the Chapter 121 term and probationary contracts and non-Chapter 21 contracts as presented.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the renewal of Chapter 21 term and probationary contracts and non-Chapter 21 contracts as presented. I can see everybody, but why don't we go ahead and do the roll call vote like we've done in the past. We'll actually go by place. Ms. Gonzalez.
You're on mute.
Aye.
All right, Mr. Chadwell,
Aye.
Ms. Feller, Ms. Vessa,
Aye.
I'm aye for place 5. Mr. Math
Aye.
and Mr. Moses.
Aye.
All right, so that passes 7-0, and we will now go to F2, the compensation plan.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, as you know, we came to you and on April 2nd, and TASB presented 2 different models, and they walked through the TASB salary study review. And they're back tonight. You all had asked for 2 additional models, and those models were keeping everyone at 2% and giving teachers 2.5%, or keeping everyone at 2% and giving a 3%. So we have Erin Kolecki, the compensation and HR consultant from TASB, as well as Amy Campbell, the director of HR services. And they're going to go over the 4 models that you have before you. And then Kristen Gray will walk through the action itself. And she's our director of compensation, culture, and total rewards here in HR in Round Rock. So Erin, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Annette. And I think Jennifer is going to upload the slides for me. Just let me know if that's not correct, and I can share a screen real fast. Jennifer, do you have the slides? Okay. So I can share a screen real fast. That's no problem if that's easier. I'll just do that. Oh, no, there they are. Thank you. So if you can go ahead and go to, go to the next one. So a couple of weeks ago, we presented 2 different models, like Annette said, a 2% model and a 3% model. And we're back tonight with a menu of options for you, a couple of additional models. But we wanted to make sure and go over, each of the models in detail so that you're comfortable, understanding what each of them accomplishes. I do want to give a quick plug. Dr. Flores and Dr. Audix are recommending the 2% model. We agree it's a good model. The goal of these pay increases is to make sure that you're keeping your pay as competitive as possible and being strategic in any adjustments that you need to do. And I think this 2% model does accomplish that. One thing that we like about a general pay increase model that gives the same pay increase for all pay groups is it preserves the pathways that you've worked hard to build in the past. We want to make sure that your people that are employed in the teacher career path are continuing to progress in their career, and these general pay increase models do accomplish that goal. So looking again at model 1, which is the 2% model, again, I just want to point out some of the basics. So we have divided this among each of your different pay groups. So you can see those in that first column. The second column shows you what the general pay increase with 2% for each of these pay groups would cost. The total for a 2% pay increase across the board is about $6.7 million. And then the next column itemizes the adjustments that we're recommending with this 2% model. And remember that the adjustments do a number of things. One of them is if we've got employees who are below the minimum of the pay range that they're in after we've adjusted the structures, it makes sure to bring those employees up to 1% above the pay grade minimum. They also, again, ensure that your teacher career pathway is intact and gives adjustments as needed. There's some internal equity adjustments, and then also some targeted adjustments where we targeted specific jobs that were particularly low to market to help drive those up to the market rate faster. So the adjustments on this model are a total of about $1.9 million. So the estimated total increase on the 2% model is about $8.7 million, or a 2.7% budget impact. And I guess we can look at the 3% model next. Jennifer, if you'll move ahead. Thank you. So this, I won't, bore you with all the specific details, but they're there for you. Again, it's broken down by the general pay increase and the adjustments for each of the pay groups. So the 3% model gives a general pay increase of about $9.9 million is the total cost of the 3% general pay increase. And then the adjustments are another $1.8 million for a estimated total increase of about 11.7, or a 3.6% budget impact. Okay, I guess we can look at the next one. So this was one that we created specifically for this meeting. So this is what we're calling Model 3, and it does give a 2.5% raise to all of your teachers and 2% to all other pay groups. So again, it still looks the same, but the general pay increase is about almost 7 million. Adjustments are another 1.9 million for an estimated total of 9.6, or a 2.8% budget impact. And I guess we can go to the next one. You guys are welcome to shout out questions if you want, or we can do that at the end. But so here's the final model, which gives a 3% increase to all of your teachers and 2% to all other pay groups. This one is the estimated total increase is about $10.7 million, or a 3.1% budget impact. So I guess now I'll open up to any questions from the board.
I just, for people who haven't watched before, just when did you collect this data? Like so that people have an understanding of like when you collected the salary study data.
Sure. Yeah. So we started this process, back in December, January with you. So how we at TASB, we work with school districts across the state. And Amy and I both work in HR services, and one of the services that we provide to districts is compensation plan studies. So Annette and Kristen sent us all of your pay data, and we collect that data. And then what we do is we compare your salaries at Round Rock ISD to salaries in other districts, and then also outside of school districts in some cases. We also bring in data from some sources that provide private sector data, so that we can compare positions that exist outside of school districts to similar positions in the private sector. So we've been working on this with you. We do pay maintenance with you, so we work with you every year. But we started this particular study around January, February, had some kickoff conversations, and then did the full market analysis when we matched up all of your jobs and made sure we were comparing, apples to apples. And then, completed the project really about a month ago, and we've been continuing to tweak it here and there since that time. It's a long process. Typically for a district of your size, this is something that happens over several months.
So since all the changes in the market in the last month, have you done any additional research? Have you seen any market trends that we as a board should be aware of?
Well, so at TASB, we use largely school district data, and so we won't be collecting school district data until next fall. That's not going to change, obviously, we know. Amy, do you have anything to add? I see.
Yeah, I was going to say that typically public sector takes a little bit of time to catch up to private sector economic changes. So we know I was in a school district back in 2010, 2011, and that economic recession happened in 2008, and so there was a bit of a delay before it hit districts. So we don't expect the districts will do anything different for this next year. Certainly they'll approach it perhaps a little more conservatively and thinking about the impacts of their salary decisions accordingly. But many of your neighbors have already adopted pay increases. We have one direct neighbor of yours who's asked for a 4% cost model to consider in the next few weeks too. So yes, while certainly we are hearing lots from private sector, we follow private sector HR as well. And so while we do hear a lot of concerns about economic downturn from school districts, it's we still have to hire teachers and we still have to fill those hard to fill positions. And so we're moving forward with pay increases across the state.
So you just said that other districts around us have already adopted, that they voted on it?
Correct. Yeah.
Pflugerville.
Dr. Addix mentioned Pflugerville. They've adopted theirs, and there are several that we've presented to, similar to what we did for y'all. I think it was last week. And so certainly they're considering different cost models. Not everyone has adopted yet. No.
From my knowledge of Central Texas, only Pflugerville. And I asked I was on the call for the Central Texas School Board Association last week, and I asked how many of them are going to be voting on it this month, and there was silence.
Yeah,
nobody. So, to the best of my knowledge, while they might be presented with proposals, I don't know of other Central Texas school districts, at least in terms of the trustees' knowledge of it on that call, that are voting on a compensation plan this month.
Well, I can speak real quick on what the superintendents of the area are. They're definitely going to be bringing to their boards, and as was pointed out, 4%, others at 3%, some at 2%. But I can't speak to trustees, but I can speak to the superintendents around the area and also throughout the state. I was on a conference call yesterday with a couple of from the Metroplex, and they're definitely going to be proposing that. So those are some things that I do know. So I don't know what board trustees are thinking, but just from the perspective of the superintendents, their plan is, because the recruiting and the things that are still necessary are going on. And that's what, so I just wanted to add that.
Ms. Feller, Amber, did you have a question? No.
I've got one real quick. So
Mr. Chadwell.
Amy, you said that somebody had requested or had adopted a 4%.
Just requested. We already presented to that particular district 2% and 3% models, and they came back and said, we really see this as an opportunity to show how competitive we're able to pay. And so it was one of the districts in Dr. Oddix's list of neighbors that have a higher tax rate. And so, but yes, they've asked for
Okay.
4%. It's not adopted yet. No.
Okay, thank you. Because I thought the only one that had adopted it was Pflugerville.
Just Pflugerville, correct. Yeah,
And
and
they
like I
did
said,
that-
we've presented a few districts. I work with most of the local districts, and so we've presented models to several districts. But
Yeah.
correct, Pflugerville's the only one that so far has
And
adopted.
they adopted that well before all the lockdown started.
Yeah, right before, I think it was the week before spring break,
Right.
or right around that time.
So
The
that's
Thursday before the spring break I watched their meeting. They adopted it then.
okay. Okay.
And I think I presented to them earlier that week or the week before, so they took action pretty quickly.
And this presentation, I don't know what it's numbered, but we talk about the starting salaries. But one of the presentations was a comparison of, on average, the 5-year, 10-year, and we're not as far behind on that presentation. I mean that calculation, if I remember right. And I don't see it. I don't know where it is, but it seemed like it was not too long ago that was presented. And I don't know if that was you that did it or Kristen, maybe you and Annette.
So I think that was me. I think you're talking about the presentation from 2 weeks ago, and yes, your teacher salaries are competitive. And the goal, of course, is to keep them that way, and to do that, we would recommend that if you have it in the budget to give a pay increase to do so.
Okay, so 2 other things I wanted to bring up real quick. We gave Annette, you want to jump in?
Yeah, what you're referring to, I believe, is what Kristen presented when she always does the health and the salary plan value together. And when she did that, she did it based on a 10-year salary teacher.
Okay.
And we were just under Del Valley. But that's at a 10-year, and that's with the health plan and salary together. And we are in our pay structure for teachers, and a lot of that had to do with last year, our upper years of teachers in the 10th year. And so we are paid a bit above market. I think we're at 104%.
Mm-hmm.
So in that role, yes, but that's at a 10-year teacher.
Okay.
Sorry.
So thank you for bringing that up. And then the other thing I wanted to ask about, we just voted on the contracts. What is Austin's? They have 2-year contracts. Do they still have that?
They have 3, actually,
3.
typically 3-year contracts. Yeah.
Okay.
Years ago, it was 1-year term contracts, which is what most every district in the state is on. We do a survey of contract practices, and that's the most common statewide. They had moved to a 3-year term contract several years ago.
Right.
There is, districts often talk about getting back to 1-year term contracts because it provides more flexibility for staffing purposes.
Round Rock, they used to do a kind of a combination and then dropped it down to 1 year. But that is that's an appeal to a lot of teachers to get a 3-year contract instead of a 1 year like Round Rock's doing in all the other districts. So it's hard to measure that, put that in the column and say it's worth $1,000 or $2,000, whatever a year, but that's just something to keep in mind. All right, thank you.
Mr. Moses, did you have a question?
Thank you, Madam President. So my question really, for whether it be Dr. Flores or Annette, would be in a typical year where we were not having to deal with COVID-19 crisis, would we be recommending 2%? And then in addition to that would be looking at what challenges we're going to face when students do come back to school, given that they will have been out of class for, not going to be the summer slide. It's going to be the summer and spring slide. Is 2% going to be enough and be adequate to work our kids and get them caught up as fast as is reasonably possible? That we have the best people in place.
Well, I would.
I started my comments.
I
started my comments earlier with that 2% is something that we felt comfortable with. We could actually do more, but I don't think with the time as uncertain as it is for the future, 2% is not only conservative, it's something that we can handle. I think Kenneth's presentation really pointed out that. So back to the question is, yes, especially with board goals that we have, obviously we have a talented staff. And one of the things that this board, and I haven't shied away from the accepting of that. I know this year the STAR test has been suspended, obviously, but What I didn't shy away from is the expectation to advance the academic achievement. Even though we're at a high level at the aggregate, I took it head on to say, hey, you're right, board. We need to focus on those that need it the most. So with that, 2% is going to keep us competitive, but it will not be the answer to put that us out in front where we would have hoped to have been. But we're not going to, and I'm not as superintendent going to do that at this point. That's why I believe not only is 2% fair at this time, it's the right number, but a definite yes, it helps in recruiting and it helps in getting the quality people that we need. And I'll just say this, that we're talking about a time that people have stepped up like never before. And we know that's something, and I could just go on and at the pride of what I have as the superintendent of saying that this staff, just like I think most staffs in the state and nation have risen up to a level they've never expected. But 2%, I think it's fair. I would love to have brought, and I think I shared this when I visited with each board member. I wish I could be presenting more to you, but 2%, I know the will of this community. And as a result, I think we're trying to just be where we need to be right now.
But and I look at this. I look at what our peers are doing in the state and locally, and it's good information. I'm not saying it doesn't matter, because it does, because you got to compare yourself to those. But what matters most is our kids, and especially in this time, knowing that when they do come back, that they have familiar faces on campuses, that they have teachers who are there and we're going to be there for a while, and that they have the best teachers we can keep, recruit from our other districts nearby, and hire straight out of college. We got to make sure we have the best right now. And I think if this is what it needs to reach those kids and help us close the gaps when we come back, because it is our most vulnerable right now, they're going to be suffering the most. And when they come back, they're going to need the most help. So if this is what we need to get that team in place, I don't really see how there's an argument against this. We need to move forward and make sure we're taking care of our staff so they can do their job in taking care of our kids.
I saw Mr. Math and then Ms. Feller.
Yes, thank you. I know we've looked at peer district, local district comparisons, but some of them are maybe better peer comparisons than others. And I know Annette rattled off the four big ones, and I can't remember. I think they were Austin, Leander, Pflugerville, and Georgetown? Austin, Leander, Pflugerville, and no? You're on, yeah.
Round Rock.
Okay, so we're Round Rock. So who are our major, when we lose people, who do we lose them to?
Well, we lose them to various districts. Sometimes we lose them to the Houston area and the Dallas area. And that's a lot of the difference now is we have a great mobile society. But we also locally, if we're losing people who have roots, sometimes what we're losing is to our local districts. We'll lose them to Georgetown. We can lose them to Leander, even Liberty Hill right now, Pflugerville. We've even lost some to Hutto. It just kind of depends. But I would say the majority of them are probably Leander is a big, probably one of the biggest. It just depends on the position too. But all of our surrounding areas is pretty much we can.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Feller?
Okay, so I have actually a general question before we talk about the actual compensation models and all of that. But in line 17 of Dr. Audit's budget, where it talks about compensation changes, talks about the overall 2% raise, and then it talks about the market adjustment, which is what we just saw presentations on again. But then it goes on and there's an additional $3.5-ish million of compensation changes, which to me seem like directly impact our students. Increasing substitute pay so that we have every classroom filled when a teacher's not there, increasing the bilingual stipend so that we attract the best bilingual teachers and keep them, buying back local days and credit for years of service so teachers are actually in the classroom as much as possible. Are those $4 million or a little less than $4 million contingent on a vote tonight, or is it just on the pay raise and market adjustments on what we're going to be voting for?
what you're voting for are the compensation ones as TASB presented it. So we're talking the adjustments are part of that, but the other pieces, the stipend increases and the years of service, that's not part of this compensation plan.
Okay, I just want to make sure because on line 17 of the budget, it's all lumped together. So I'm going to just make sure that for clarification purposes that we're really not voting on that whole 12.1 million that's in the budget. We're really only voting on the model, the total cost of each model. So, okay, that's the clarification question I had.
Sorry, Mr. Moses.
Thank you, Madam President. I know last year we did a big step up for our bus drivers. I was just curious what we're doing for them this year, and if and really the fact that they're not driving buses on this semester, if there's any impact there to them.
Dr. Otis, you want to take that question? Because I do think that with Pflugerville, with their passage, and I think our bus drivers, we got competitive and actually surpassed Pflugerville's bus drivers last year or close to it. And now with a 3%, and if we go no, it's going to be tough. But Kenneth can speak to that a lot better.
So last year we increased the driver starting wage $3 an hour to $19.03. That put us $1 underneath Pflugerville. Pflugerville is at $20. They've already, with their increase, they've taken their starting driver wage to $21 an hour. So this past year we operated in an environment, and chronically short and all that kind of thing, but we were $1 behind them. Now if we did nothing, we'd be $2 behind them. So that's where we are. And in terms of the recommendation that we have in like the TASB's presentation would be to increase the drivers $1 an hour to take them from 1903 to 2003. So we'd still be $1 behind Pflugerville, but we'd be in the same place. We wouldn't gain any ground on them, but we wouldn't, fall $2 behind versus being $1 behind them.
So they're in the operations support line of the model? Like, is that where bus drivers and that falls? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Did anyone have any other questions for our TASB presenters? I know, Kristen, did you have something you were going to add?
So Kristen was going to walk us through the actual models themselves.
Okay.
And of course, our administration recommendation is Model 1 with the appendices 1 attached. And I'll let Kristen go ahead and address those.
Okay, thank you, Annette. So I'll go kind of a high-level overview for each of the 4 models. We'll begin with model number 1. This model will result in increasing the teacher and librarian's starting salary to $50,000, and employees would receive an $1,100 general pay increase. In this model, we would also implement all the TASB recommendations for all other employees and give an increase equal to 2% of their pay range midpoint. And Model 1 is represented in Appendix 1 that's also included in the agenda item. Model number 2 for the 3% model would increase the teacher starting salary to $51,000 with a $1,600 general pay increase. Again, implementing the TASB recommendations that would include an increase of 3% of the pay range midpoints for all other employees. And this is represented in Appendix number 2. And then Model 3 is one of the variable approaches, would result in teachers getting a 2.5% increase, which would take starting wages to $50,500 and a $1,350 general pay increase. Under this variable option, all other employees would receive a 2% of their midpoint. And then the last model, number 4, another variable where teachers would receive a 3% raise, taking the starting salary to $51,000, similar to option number 2, a $1,600 general pay increase, and all other employees would get 2% of their respective midpoints. And this is reflected in Appendix number 4.
So as I said, the administration recommendation is that we have a 2% pay increase, and that includes Appendix 1. That's Model 1, Appendix 1.
All right, I guess before we start, did anybody have any other questions for staff or TASB? We had talked a little bit then. Thank you, Annette and Amy and Aaron and who else talked? Kristen. We had talked a little bit about allowing each trustee to have 3 minutes to kind of talk about how they felt about the compensation plan, as just a way, since I know I can actually see everybody today, but I don't know if everybody can see everybody, and that way everyone has a chance to say their piece. We were going to do it by place. So Ms. Gonzalez, and actually Mr. Math is going to kind of keep time. I don't think we're going to be super strict about our 3 minutes, but he'll let us know, and you can know to wrap it up if you are about to the end. So Ms. Gonzalez, we will turn it over to you. You're muted.
So I would go with Model 1. I think it's a conservative. I think it's a recommendation. Since I've been on this board, we have given our teachers an increase in pay. For me, it's not about being competitive with other districts. It's about treating our teachers as professionals. They are teaching our most prized possessions, our kids. They deserve better. We must give gradual increases just to be able to live in Round Rock. I called a mortgage broker yesterday. A single new teacher cannot qualify for a median home mortgage in Round Rock, Texas. She has to have a near perfect credit score, he or she, and have student loans under $5,000. That, with the cost of higher education, that's usually not possible. Teachers leave the profession of education every day because they cannot make ends meet. Our students and our teachers deserve better. I've heard some hints from other trustees to wait. What are we waiting for? Are we going to wait for the legislature to tell us what the education state budget is going to look like? Because that won't happen until May of 2022. So Model 1 is my choice.
Thank you. So place 2 is Mr. Chadwell. If you would had any statements you'd like to make.
Sure. I'll make a couple statements here. So I don't have anything prepared, but I do want to make a few statements. And one of them is that, of course, all of this coronavirus is changing everything that we had expected even 2 months ago. A lot of our neighboring districts have decided to wait if they're going to do it at all. The University of Texas, Texas State, a lot of the companies are on a hiring freeze. They are canceling any raises that they have going on. So we're competing not only with other districts, but with also other commercial organizations in the area. We did give a great raise last year. I think we got caught up, and that was a testament to the support that Ms. Gonzalez just said, and that everybody said. I do think that there is a need to increase the salary on a regular basis to keep up with inflation. But this year, with what's going on, I don't know if you all got your tax appraisals today. Mine came in today. Some of them are going up depending on where you live. Some are going down. That 4%, that's the assumption on the page that Dr. Audix mentioned earlier, has to do predominantly with new construction that was started a year ago. So the price of housing, to counter what Ms. Gonzalez said a moment ago, I do think the price of housing is going to go down significantly in rental properties. That's a speculation. I am on the appraisal board. I was on that call the other day. There's a lot of unknowns that are going on. And I just think that we have so much going on. My preference is we wait 2 weeks and see what's going on, get a little bit better perspective about our neighboring districts and the other community. I don't think the legislature will be making a decision. I don't think Governor Abbott right now plans to call a special session for this, but he may. But I do know that we have to make a decision before soon, so teachers will know and staff will know before the end of the school year. And then finally, I will make a statement that all of our students are important. They're all going to suffer from the summer slump plus the spring slump And everybody across the state, everybody across the nation is going to be dealing with that. How do you get students back ramped up? So it's not that we're going to be in a different situation than everybody else. And all of our students, the most vulnerable, as Mr. Moses said, everybody, they're all going to need a lot of attention. And I do applaud the administration for the work that they have been doing, the staff, the food service workers, and the IT department to hand out 9,000 Chromebooks, meals distribution. I know there's a lot of changes in the teaching and learning, even though we've gotten a few emails. Some people are saying it's too much work. Some people are saying it's not challenging enough. I know that it'll get better, so I'm confident with that. But right now, my preference is to wait. I'm not opposed to it, but I'm just not ready for tonight to make a decision on that. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Feller, place 3.
So I have done a lot of thinking and analysis, and bottom line is there is an incredible amount of unknown. We're all aware of that. We could run every possible scenario, positive or negative, and then we probably still wouldn't even fit what actually happens and transpires as we move into the future here. When I look at the budget that's been presented, and we can afford to give a 2%, which is a very modest increase to our staff, and still end up at the end of the day with another extra $1 million in our fund balance. I know there are some cost-cutting procedures that we can do if we are faced with some budget shortfalls moving forward. But given the budget that was presented, where we stand with our very healthy fund balance, and bottom line, it comes down to the kids and how does this impact our kids? And, I just think that we run a significant risk. I'm not saying that I think that a ton of people who are already employed with us are probably going to leave over $1,000, but we have staff that are going to be leaving just on a regular basis for retirement, things like that. So our ability to recruit new teachers and new staff, not even teachers, it's anybody that works in the district. I say teachers, but I really mean any staff member in the entire district, that recruiting these and retaining them when we are having to fill vacancies, that I'm definitely supporting an equitable pay raise, which is Model 1, 2% for everybody.
All right, place 4, Ms. Vessa.
So I first want to just thank all the dedicated staff that have done just an incredible job over the past few weeks as we have adjusted to this new reality. And I do want to say that I have a history of, working really hard to get the most resources for our district possible. I advocate constantly. But in the middle of so much uncertainty surrounding this virus and our economy, the only thing that I'm certain of is that our resources have decreased, and they will continue to do so for the foreseeable future. And I make decisions based on data. I research and I study and I make an informed choice. And to be fair, the administration here, their presentation is based on data, but it's dated. These salary studies were completed last fall, and we just don't live in the same world. We have gone from having the lowest unemployment rate ever to the highest. Over 1 million people have filed for unemployment benefits in Texas, and 80 to 85% of callers don't even get through right now to file. 2 weeks ago, the comptroller estimated an unemployment rate of over 9% trending upwards. Now economists think it could be as high as 17%, and those same economists believe it will continue to grow. Our revenue picture is bleak, and we have been advised by state leaders like the comptroller to hold the line or decrease spending. But tonight we're talking about raises, increasing spending, and I understand the logic. We've been told that other neighboring school districts are proceeding with their plans for pay increases, some as high as 4%. And if we don't follow suit, we won't be offering a competitive wage. But I was on a call last week with other trustees from the Central Texas School Board Association, and I asked who was voting this month on compensation plans. And there was silence. Only Pflugerville has voted, and they voted before all the ramifications of the pandemic really came to light. Dr. Flores has told us about his conversations with neighboring superintendents who are asking their boards for raises, but their boards haven't actually proved them. So I have no data post-pandemic that confirms that we will be put at a competitive disadvantage if we don't approve this compensation plan tonight. Whatever I decide, I'm going to have to defend. And I just don't have the data to be able to defend approving this plan tonight. That is why I propose waiting. And maybe I still won't have great data in 2 weeks or a month. But at least I can say I waited as long as I could to get the best data I could. And that's all I have.
Thank you. And I'm place 5. So and many of you may know, I've talked to Dr. Flores several times. I've been really, really struggling with this because it's not about the worth of our teachers. Our teachers are and I agree with Ms. Feller. It's not just teachers, it's teachers and staff. And I realized that I was kind of the one that said, can we get the different models? And I didn't mean to imply that our staff aren't as important as our teachers. And any other time, Dr. Flores would be wanting to go with your 4%. And in the past 2 weeks, we have seen, as somebody else mentioned, Dell and UT, and there's a hiring freezes. And I think, Amber asked me yesterday, well, what are you hoping to get if we wait? What information do you want? And, I just feel like, the governor's got his press conference tomorrow. There will be more information that comes out at the end of the month when we get a picture of what April really looked like. We'll see what other states are doing, other countries are doing, how quickly people are really coming out of this. My big concern, and I think somebody mentioned, 2011, and I know that we have people in this district that have lived through that and we've come out okay, but it was tough to lay teachers off. And for us to add this $6 or $12 million to our budget, I know we'll be fine next year. It's the year after. The year after, when we add a pool, when we add an elementary school, when we have all these extra costs that we already know are coming, and we may be cutting. And so I'm truly just struggling with this, having this conversation tonight. I've asked numerous times if we could postpone it. Why did we have to have it tonight? Because I don't feel like I'm at a place where I can add to our budget. I'm treating this like I would my home finances, and I'm not going to spend extra money at home. I'm not going to dip into savings right now until I know. I'm going to have 3 kids in college next year. For the next 2 years, I have to plan for more than just next year. And I can't ask the district to do anything different than I would do with my home finances. So I see that my time is up, and I'll just say that I also would like to hold off on this decision just a little bit. And I'm not an ant. I mean, I am an ant. I'm not a grasshopper, and I just can't feel good about this tonight. So it is now place 6, Mr. Math. Let me pull up a timer for you. I'll time you. Okay.
I could time myself. I won't take
Okay.
Yeah. So, I've also struggled with this, and I think the trustees that have spoke before me have made some very good points, pluses and minus. 2 weeks ago, when we talked about this, I was very much in favor of teacher salary increases. I just didn't want it to be funded with the tax increase. And I applaud administration, Dr. Audix, especially for taking that off the table for now and coming up with a budget that I think is very well thought out and very reasonable. So we're not deficit spending. We're cutting some operational costs to fund the raise. We have the money. You saw we'll end up $220 million or so in fund balance. that's about a half a year of expenses. So we have a lot of savings built up. But, I am sensitive also to some of the things folks brought up about what happens in 2 years out. I don't know what happens in 2 years out, but I think we've got a good bankroll. So I really asked myself, is it fiscally responsible? And, generally it's fiscally responsible for year one. For year two, who knows? But I feel comfortable having that $220 million. Then I asked myself, is it operationally prudent? And I'm a very, very strong believer that you have to pay your employees at or above market value, and that's a core belief of mine. I think you need that to attract and retain the best talent. And, quite frankly, 2% is not an unreasonable ask. So, yeah, I think it's operationally prudent. But for, the big elephant in the room is that we're in the middle of this tremendous economic uncertainty and pandemic. And I just don't know how it looks if people are getting laid off and we have record high unemployment and we're voting an increase. I'm not saying I wouldn't do it. I'm not saying I'm there. Maybe I'm almost there. Maybe I'm there. I don't know. But there is something to be said for maybe keeping our powder dry to see what other districts do. I hate being the first one out of the box, but for Pflugerville that declared before all of this mess. So let's see, I'm at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So I'll just close and say that I see merits to both sides. And I really want to make sure that we pay our teachers fairly, and we get to that point, whether it's today or whether it's in the future. That is critical. Pay our staff, not only teachers, but all of our staff fairly. Thank you.
Mr. Moses, please 7. You're up.
Hey, Madam President. These are uncertain times. And I feel like as leaders of our community, of our school district, it's not just our job, but our responsibility to, wherever we can, provide some certainty, especially in these times, especially when it impacts kids. And I think a 2% salary increase provides our staff some certainty and some comfort as we navigate these uncharted waters. I think it provides us with the certainty that we have the team in place on each of us to reach our students in the most effective way when they do come back through our doors, and even virtually if we're still here in the fall. I think it also provides some certainty to our taxpayers and our parents that they will continue to be provided with the world-class public education that Round Rock is known for across the state and the nation. I think it provides some certainty to our business owners and local community members that will continue to graduate citizens that are ready for work in college the day they walk across the stage. So by providing this salary increase to our staff, I don't view it as a negative at all. And it actually gives me comfort knowing that we're going to have these people for a while, because you're right. We don't know what's going to come from the legislature next session, but we all can probably suspect that it's going to be more challenging to give a raise a year from now than it is today. So I would say right now, let's do what we can. As it's been said, we have the money. Because if we don't do this, we're going to put about $13 million in fund balance. And I get it's hard to go talk to our neighbors and community members that have been furloughed to tell them we're giving a raise. But it's just as hard going to look at a child's teacher and say, hey, we didn't get a raise this year, but we did put $13 million away in fund balance. That doesn't feel right. And so I would really encourage us to not wait. I don't know what new data we're going to get the next 2 weeks to make this even better. I don't want to wait, or nor do I really want to let what other countries do impact our decision making and here in Round Rock, Texas, America. So I think we can do what's best for our students, and that is get them the staff they need in place to impact their learning on a day-to-day basis through this crisis and beyond. So I support the administration's recommendation of a 2% raise.
Thank you, Mr. Moses. Ms. Gonzalez, we were going to go back around one more time if people had anything else they wanted to add after hearing all the other comments. You got to unmute.
I go back to what are we waiting for? What would be the wait? I know some of you don't feel good about it. I feel good about it. I know what we should do. I don't understand waiting 2 weeks for more. There's not going to be any more data. It's not going to reflect drastically from the data that we have now. And I go back to, and I know all of y'all say this, what other districts are doing. Why can't we be leaders and not followers? I don't understand that concept. Our teachers don't make enough money to own a home in this district. And that's not okay. I don't know. It bothers me that we're talking about waiting because nothing is going to change.
Mr. Chadwell, did you have any follow-up comments?
My only comment that we do have the money, and I know it's in the fund balance, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm glad to see that the proposal was for no tax increase. That originally there was a small tax increase, and it would have been a $33 a month, I think, on $33 per year per average homeowner. But until this lockdown, until these states and the governor starts lifting this lockdown, that's the one thing that I do think will come out in the next couple of weeks, that we will see that if they come back and say the trend is in a good direction, then we can say, okay, we're ready to move forward. But as long as this lockdown that the governor and all governors, I can't control what's going on across the other countries, but certainly within Texas and certainly in central Texas, it's getting worse. It's still getting more strict every day. So if anything else, that's the only thing until we see that trend and that release going in the other direction. My view is we have to be careful about what we're doing. And this has nothing to do with not taking care of our kids and not thinking about the future, and taking care of teachers and staffers. They're all important. I do know that. But until the trend is in the other direction, I believe that we need to be fiscally responsible and conservative. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Feller, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I just wanted to say I definitely can respect everybody who's voiced their opinions. I go back to the history that we have as our district, in that we have a long-standing reputation of being very good fiscally responsible district with our money, and are the envy of statewide, of our fund balance, of our debt ratings, things like that. So I sense the fear. I have the fear, but I don't think that there's going to be anything new, other than, Mr. Chadwell does make a good point that we will have a little better understanding on when things will start to reopen. But in terms of the financial impacts and things like that, we won't have a clear picture in a couple of weeks. And, I wholeheartedly agree with Mr. Math that we pay high and we compensate our staff because we think they're doing a good job. And, I'm concerned about the number of incoming teachers that we will have for next year, with colleges closing down and things like that, I worry that if we're having to attract for people that have left, are we going to be able to attract the best talent out there that's going to be in the classroom with our kids? Because they are going to have some lags from this at-home learning and being out of the school buildings for 5 months. It's going to happen. So we've got to have the best talent out there to be able to address things for our students. And that's bottom line. What it comes down to me is, how do we best help our students? And I think that this is the way that we do it.
Ms. Vessa, did you have any follow-up comments?
Yeah, I can tell you what data we're looking for. I'm definitely looking for more solid unemployment rate statistics. If we are upwards of 20%, that's telling. I'm looking for revenue estimates. Our state is funded by sales tax revenues, that's the main bulk of it. Then we have oil and gas remittances, which are just obliterated. And then we have franchise taxes, which are also obliterated. So I'm looking at least to get one portion of that. We're going to get some preliminary numbers on sales tax revenues for the month of March, and that will be helpful in understanding the hit to the state budget. And right now, the comptroller doesn't think we're going to go into special session. That's their belief. But I would really like some solid sales tax revenue to make sure that they're not going to go into special session this summer, because our revenue has plummeted to such a degree that we don't even have, money in the rainy day fund to get us through this biennium. I want to make 100% sure that we have enough money in the rainy day fund to get us through the biennium. So other things that I'm looking for, I think Chad made a really good point about when we're going to go back to, the where we'll be in terms of reopening. Another point that I want to make is we talked about, okay, we have the money. Well, I was really trying to show through my questions is that we hope to have the money. Our current assumptions say we have the money, but those assumptions could be wrong. And we could be looking at, very conservative is losing 1%. We could be losing 5%. We could be losing 10%. We really just don't know. We don't know how many of our staff are going to be infected, and we really have, to be hospitalized, and we have to pay for those expenses. So obviously I'm not going to know that in the next 2 weeks, but I just wanted to kind of comment on, we're saying that we know that we have the revenue. I'm not as 100% sure that we do. Also, another thing we might know is if other districts, where they're at, where they're landing. I think that would be helpful.
All right, thank you. So it's back to me, and I just wanted to, I wanted to reiterate that I don't want to say no. I mean, I don't want to say no to a pay raise to our teachers. I think that, we were told by TASB 2 weeks ago, you can give it at any time. We can wait until we have more information. I mean, I agree with Corey. I think I had written down as Dr. Audix was giving his presentation, one little mistake last time, we can handle that. But what if there's more than one? What if there's more than one assumption that's incorrect? Again, I just go back to these are uncharted waters. And a certainty of a raise this year might mean a certainty of layoffs or larger class sizes or all of those things that may come up in the 21-22 school year. And I just feel like we have to be more fiscally conservative with our thinking in this situation. That while I want to give teachers pay raises, and if it turned out, Dr. Flores, that there was a miracle cure, I would love to come back in July or June and say, hey, here is 4%, here is more. And, maybe we'll backdate it. Maybe we'll do something. But to say on April 16th that we know we're getting all of this money, we're all of our assumptions are on the positive side. There isn't that contingency on the negative side. And I hate to be that negative person because that's really not me. But I also just, it's just such an unknown, positive or negative, that, and I personally think maybe we need to wait even more than 2 weeks, but I'm just not comfortable today with what we know, that anything is certain. Mr. Math, I will turn it over to you if you have any other comments.
Sure. I'm troubled that we have lack of unity and common thinking, but everyone's entitled to their opinion. with regard to what if this, what if that, we could what if ourselves to death. At some point we need to make a decision, and it might be today, might be 2 weeks, but at some point we need to make a decision and live with the consequences. With respect to, Trustee Gonzalez mentioned, why can't we be leaders and put a number out there? And, I think being a leader is important, but I've seen in prior years where we put out a number, and then Leander and some of the other districts, quite frankly, play us for suckers, and they just put out their number $200, $300, $400 higher than ours. So, I'm not sure that we always need to be the first one out there with our bid. In negotiations, often those that make the first offer are at a disadvantage, and these are uncertain times. I wouldn't mind seeing at least one other district come out with an increase, because I think they're waiting for us, because I don't know that they want to give increases during these uncertain times. But above it all, I think we need to be competitive with our salaries, and I'll leave it at that.
Mr. Moses.
Thank you, Madam President. And real quick, I have a question, just a really clarifying question for Dr. Flores or Annette. It's been mentioned that we had layoffs in 2011. Is that accurate?
I wasn't here in 2011, so I'll let Annette speak, but I think I can answer it for. Obviously, it was dire. There were positions that were teachers that were let go, but eventually, by the end of the time to get that, we didn't lose positions at the end. We lost some teachers because they were told they needed, basically they wouldn't have a job. And so they did the right thing and they were hired, but it turns out those positions at the end of the year before the school year started, they were all returned. So we did lose some. Annette, you want to add anything to that if I misspoke?
Sure. Now, that was my first year in HR, actually, as a director at the time. And I learned my job very quickly. But we did, I believe it was about 254. I could be wrong about the number at this time. It's been a while. But we did hire almost everybody back. Not exactly the same person, but as far as positions, we were able to bring them back. And the beauty at that time was the fund balance. Our board decided once we had to make those tough decisions, they said, you know what, we just can't do this. And so we went into fund balance and were able to bring people back. So yeah, it was a very trying time. And, I think during that time, that was another first for school districts in Texas. And it was something, as I recall, Susan Brown on her way out saying, if y'all can navigate this, you can do just about anything, because it was really tough. But also, I think we learned a lot during that. So if we are faced with anything like that again, I think strategically, we'll probably do some things very different in our district. But we'll also be very strategic about it and be wise about it and plan for that. So, yes, it did happen. But like I said, we were able to bring them back because of our fund balance.
Thank you. So I just want to get that clarified, just have that in the back of our brain. So, listening to everybody, I do respect everyone's opinion, but I go back to us putting potentially $13 million in fund balance. So I understand, we could play, as Trustee Mass said, play the what if game through and through, but we also know that for a fact, what we've heard from the staff is they're doing a hiring freeze. If the position becomes open, they're not filling it right away. They're analyzing to see if it's even available. If we look at the numbers, I know Ned has said this, that if over the summer we see that enrollment of new students is dropping, we'll slow hiring and adjust accordingly. So I feel like we have the procedures in place to manage that if that number, that assumption comes in lower and adjust, and how we have the resources there to adjust. But again, I get that now sometimes it is a fearful time, but I've never been one to let fear drive decision making. I've never been one to let the what ifs 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road drive decision making. Right now, all we can deal with is the present, and the present is that like I said a minute ago, we have an opportunity here to not just provide certainty, but also make sure we stay on par. Let's just say that these districts do 4% or let's use 3% for Hutto, since that's out there. That puts them at 51,500. Are we okay with them being $2,000 ahead of us? We think that keeps us competitive, and then that can compound itself year over year. So I think it's important that we do stay competitive, that we provide some consistency, some continuity, and provide some certainty to our staff. And we take this, really see this as an opportunity to say, hey, we're investing in you and our staff in the hardest of times that we've seen. So we hope that when there are years that we can't do this, that you remember that we've invested in you in this hard time, and we build up that trust and that capital with them so they stick with us as we navigate these choppy waters that we know are ahead of us. I have confidence that we'll do it just to the best of our ability, but I think now it's not the time to be timid. And I don't think now is the time to be fearful. I think now is the time to be confident and lead forward and say to our staff, we're happy you're a part of our team, and to go out and encourage those who are not yet on Team Roanoke ISD, give them a very strong incentive to join us as we welcome our students back whenever that is, and do so with the best people on the bus that we can.
Madam President, may I add something real quick? I promise to be very brief. I started Kenneth's presentation. I prefaced, I said, allow me to speak prior to his budget presentation. And even I'm now more convinced that after the budget presentation, not only has Kenneth, I believe in our CFO, I do not believe that those assumptions are at all off. And if they are, and if, like I said before, we can do something, this board can do something with regards to an attraction that Round Rock ISD provides, with regards to some possible open enrollment. Other districts won't like that around us, but that's not where we are right now. Let me just end with saying this is my 12th compensation as superintendent to be bringing to a board. Never have I been more proud. Maybe it's the world situation or not, but the fact that we are saying $13 million, I can tell you no district, regardless of whether they do or do not, is going to put $13 million into a fund balance this coming year and jeopardizing the opportunity to tell staff, we appreciate you at a time of uncertainty, a time that they know that we need opportunities to put the best in front of our students. So all I'm saying to that, I believe in our staff. I know you do as well. This vote, I can tell you, is going to be a tough one. I didn't think it was going to be that tough, but obviously it is because of the circumstances. But just know this, that I will always believe in the staff of Round Rock ISD, regardless of the vote that is about to happen. So again, but the vote needs to happen. Let me remind you that we adopt the July 1 to June 30 budget. And so we're always a month ahead. And Mr. Matthew, you're exactly right. A lot of times districts wait for us and they have that luxury, and they do, and then they beat us. But that's fine because we're competitive. We know we're at least competitive. Right now, tonight, if they go out and do beat us, then that's a whole different story. But again, this is a tough decision. It shouldn't be. This is the proudest compensation plan that I brought to a board in 12 years. So thank you.
All right. So that was kind of what we had decided we would do, is go around twice. But Mr. Moses?
I was going to make a motion.
Wait, Corey, you just muted yourself, Corey.
I'm going to make a motion as well. I move to postpone the vote on compensation.
No.
Wait, let Mason can go.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I move that the Board of Trustees approve the adoption of the 2020-2021 compensation plan as reflected in Model 1, Appendix 1. That's the 2% salary increase.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the I'm not looking at it, Mason. Sorry, my screen went off.
To approve the 2020-2021 compensation plan, Model 1, 2% salary increase.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez. All right, is there any further discussion?
Well, does my motion go first? I think in the Roberts rules, if I make a motion,
you got to make your motion first.
Can I make a motion right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then I'm going to move. I move to postpone the vote on compensation to the next regularly scheduled board meeting. Is there
Okay. Did you hear me?
I'll second that.
I called the question before she finished her motion.
Okay, wait, hold on. Can I get I'm going to grab my stuff real quick. I have my Robert's rules over here. All right, and Doug, maybe you can chime in when I look. I know there's a chart for the order of motions. So Mason had the main motion, and then Corey had a subsidiary motion to postpone.
Or would that be an amendment?
So it should have been an amendment, but it wasn't. So we need to vote.
Well,
You had
no,
a second,
it can
you had
be.
a second from Amber. You had a
Yes.
second. Mason made the motion.
You make
Amber,
two motions. You have to make one motion and then you can amend the motion. You cannot make two.
Not according to this. So give me 1 second, please, because there are subsidiary motions and to the main motion, and one of them is to postpone. And I actually have. Hold on. Let me look at the index. So is the motion to postpone?
Doug,
So-
do you have any information on this so that she's not having to try and figure it out from a manual?
Yeah. So generally, when someone makes a motion and there's a second, if another party makes a motion right after that, that's considered either a substitute motion or it may have precedence over the motion that's on the floor. A motion to postpone is similar to a motion to table, and that is to be taken before you take the main motion.
Yeah, that's what the TASB appendix for ranking motions. It says motions are listed in order of rank. When any one of these motions is immediately pending, those above it are in order and those below it are not in order. So a main motion is 1 and the postponement is 6. So 6 goes first, which would be Corey's motion.
Did I not call the question though before any other conversation was had?
I didn't hear it.
Okay.
I'm sorry. So
Either way, this comes down to adopt the 2% raise as presented or postpone for the
well, okay, so if we're going to go by TASB's ranking of motions, it says for the postponement, it requires a second, which we have. It's debatable. And it takes just a majority. So we'll do that one first per the TASB regulations. So the motion was to postpone until the next regular meeting. And then we had a second. So is there any comment about that, Mr. Moses?
I think I saw Mr. Matt's hand first, so I'll
Oh.
let him go if he has one.
Yeah, so I'd like a better understanding of, for those that made the motion or seconded it or others, what you're looking to know a month from now that you don't know today.
I think it was 2 weeks.
I say that without
Well,
judgment.
actually,
just
Corey's motion was next regular meeting. So I'll let Corey answer that.
Oh, just for clarification, when is the next regular meeting?
I got to pull out paper. Sorry, people. April. And since I don't have to hardly use my calendar anymore, our next regular meeting is
May 21st.
Yeah, I switched
May
all the way to
28th.
Okay.
It's on the calendar.
Oh, yeah,
right
it was
now.
May 28th.
Okay.
May 28th, because the 21st would have been the day before graduation.
So that's 6 weeks from now.
Yeah.
So
So I guess I have two questions. I'll just throw them out there. What are we looking to know? And it's 6 weeks seems like a lot to me. I'm open to hearing what you're looking for in less than 6 weeks, but 6 weeks just seems like a lot.
Well, I'm looking to get, I think that what Chad said is absolutely valid, to see what happens in terms of the lockdown, the stay in place, and the governor's plan tomorrow for the plan in terms of reopening, what that looks like. I'm also looking forward to seeing the unemployment statistics to get it. We don't even have any firm numbers right now. I'm also looking to see the how much state sales tax has been impacted, and they will have those numbers for March in May. And so I think there's a lot. I explained the relevance of those in my previous speech, but I'm really, my main concern is that I want to know with certainty that we're not going into a special session, because we have seen such a plummet in state revenue that we can't use the rainy day fund to even get us to the next biennium, that we have to make cuts to not go in the red. So that's something I'd really like to know. I'd also like to just see what some other districts do. Likely there'll at least be, like you said, one other district that makes a decision, and I think that is a really powerful indicator. So those are my main desires in terms of waiting.
Mr. Moses. Oh, I think Mason was after.
Okay.
Steve, did you have a?
Yes. Yeah. I was going to kind of follow the same line that Steve did, is look for some rationale, and hearing that it's 6 weeks. I mean, 6 weeks is longer than we've all been staying home. So waiting 6 more weeks to take action and give staff some certainty, to me, just doesn't seem appropriate. And I just don't think even the information we're going to have, while it's important information, is going to be that impactful on this decision. I just think that it's important for us. I think it's important that tonight we either tell staff or give them a raise, or give them a heads up that they're not, so they can plan their own monthly budgets. Either way, if we just leave them hanging and don't do anything for 6 more weeks, it's hard for them to start planning their own home budgets and their own situations accordingly. I hope they're being conservative regardless, but we know that's not how everyone is, and not everyone has great financial health. So we need to make sure that we're giving them at least some direction on we're doing something or we're doing nothing, and leave it at that. I'm for doing something.
All right, Mr. Chadwell, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought, after listening to your next regular meeting, I thought we were going to wait at least 2 weeks and see what happens. I mean, that was my preference, is to wait 2 weeks. We can always, even if we said next regular meeting 6 weeks, we can always call another meeting anytime with 3 days notice and pass it at that time. If the governor tomorrow lifts the lockdown, we could post a meeting next week and vote then. So I would say no later than, that's my Corey.
Well, it actually occurred to me, by making that motion as regular meeting instead of a date, if, say, graduation, we don't have graduation, and the governor does come out tomorrow and says we're closed through May, we could set our regular meeting earlier. We could bump it back up either to the 21st, or even, I think it's the 21st, the week before that, or even the week up. I mean, we would have control over that.
But we could call a special meeting anytime and pass this. It could be one agenda item.
Yes, but that we would have to amend. Let me see. Well, it is amendable. The postponement is amendable, but we would have to give a specific date right now, as opposed to just saying regular meeting.
Could we say agreed upon at the next, or at a meeting date to be agreed upon. I don't know. I mean, that's why I went with next. Do we have to? Why don't we get rid of regularly? Next scheduled meeting. That solves it. Next scheduled meeting. Then the next scheduled meeting. Then that would probably be in like 2 weeks. I think that's when we have our next meeting.
30.
Can I have Kenneth?
I would rather have more time than that, to be honest. I'm happy with 21st, 28th. I know that I think that we're going to get a lot more data then. I'll be in a lot better position to give the community rationale for my decision, and I'll feel a lot more comfortable. But if the will of the board is the longest they want to wait is to our next meeting, then I'm willing to amend the motion to next meeting rather than next regularly scheduled meeting.
Well, we do also have PIB that was May 4th, which I was going to ask for that to be a full board meeting and not just a PIB meeting anyway.
I was actually going to bring that up in the announcement section. So
yeah, me too. Ms. Feller?
May 4th is a Monday?
If you put it as the next scheduled meeting, then that can be any meeting that we call. It can be a specially called meeting because it's scheduled. It'll be on the calendar. You just put it could be any meeting that we had.
It should be a
So how about we pick a date? I'll throw one out and people tell me May 14th, Thursday.
Okay.
Can I have Mr. Audix or Dr. Audix? There are ramifications, and I stated that our budget development isn't just 90% of our budget is salary. I mean, our employees, the salary and compensation is critical to that. As we develop this budget, what do you need? Because I want to be fair to staff. I mean, I don't believe that the sky's falling now, and I don't believe the sky's going to fall. So, Kenneth, can you help with what best help us? And what decisions are we actually going to need? I mean, what data am I asking staff to have that's different than tonight? I think you've said that, but whether or not that's coming, we know that sales tax revenue, everybody's been home. We know what the March sales tax is going to be. I mean, so again, the indicators are there, but let me ask Kenneth. Let me have Kenneth respond to that.
Yes, I'll say sort of two things. From 2 weeks from now, I have no expectation that what we presented tonight that's going to fundamentally change, because our revenue is already, the expectation of that's already locked in based on basic allotment isn't moving. Demographer's not going to give us student count projections. All the assumptions we talked through tonight aren't going to have no expectation that I'm going to give you anything 2 weeks from now than anything that we talked about tonight. So that kind of as a backdrop, I get the desire would like information sources about the economy, what have you, from other pieces. So, but that's what I can say in terms of from the budget that I would present to you. The other piece, just from a very practical standpoint, because I get that y'all want the gift of time. From a practical standpoint, Annette's team and my team have got to actually take that and make it a reality. It's got to get all 7,000 people have got to get coded to a function, all that sort of thing. And that's teamwork between Annette's team needs a given amount of time. And then my team's got to take that and handle it the rest of the way. So I'll turn it over to Annette in a second, but I'll say this in terms of my team. One of the realities of losing talent, last year, Rosanna, who was with us 10 years, she's not here. We got, Sarah's very good, but she just got here as a director of finance. Tomorrow, after tomorrow, we lose Wayne. And so we're going to be, have a brand new person. All this is going to be first time through. So to shorten that window, it's just like, we talked about early on in the financials, we missed something last year. Well, just like anything, the faster you have to run, the faster you have to hurry. You're just begging for a mistake as part of that overall process. So with that, kind of would start by saying, Annette, because they're the most detailed piece, we can, make some assumptions and stuff on our end to get it to a functional level. But, she and Kristen and their team, they've got to be to the person. So she's going to take the most time. If we have to just make assumptions on our end, we can do that versus being, very analytical and thorough if we have to. So, Annette.
Sure. So for our team, especially, it hits two parts of my team. Certainly staffing. So you're looking at recruitment and retaining people, and now it's the hiring season. So as you can probably tell on our job site right now, we're already posting those jobs for next year, and we're getting ready to roll. So are other districts. And so it does help us in recruitment and retainment of having a decision, so we know exactly what we can tell our employees that we're actually paying them. The other thing is those pay adjustments. As you remember last year, we had the salary study done by TASB as well. That wasn't for the entire district. And we had some conversation this week about that. We all were able to do it, with the teacher raises when they changed. If you recall, we adopted the 3% already. So a lot of that back work had already been done. When I say back work, it's not that we just load up tables and push a button. It's a lot of audits that have to happen, a lot of adjustments that have to happen, and you have to go back and audit again, because the last thing you want to do in HR and payroll is to not pay somebody or pay somebody incorrectly. So that's very important to us. So it does take time to get those things in. So that is a huge piece. It comes to HR first. Kristen does her magic, but it's a lot of auditing, and a lot of other people are involved in that. Then it goes to Kenneth's crew, and they have to do the finance crew, like he said, and they put them on the orgs. And then it has to go to benefits, and they have to do their pieces. And then it goes to payroll, and they have to do theirs. And at every single stage, there are audits. So the more we have to rush this, we do have that opportunity for error, which of course we don't want. The biggest piece is our budget's adopted pretty quick. It's adopted in June. So we have to be ready for July payroll. We have to be ready to pay people in July. And it also includes all of our subs then too. So all of that happens in July, that we start to pay new money. So that's the time crunch that we're under. So that's the importance of having a decision so we can move forward with the compensation plan, and so we can recruit and retain our people.
I recommend we either do it the 30th or the May 4th, 2 weeks from tonight, or...
I call the question.
Okay. Well, then the question is the next regular board meeting, because that's the motion that's still sitting on the table. It wasn't amended.
Can I amend my motion?
He called the question.
Oh, okay.
All
Well,
right.
you know how I feel.
So we have a motion and a second to postpone the vote until our next regular board meeting. So we'll go down in order. Ms. Gonzalez?
No.
Mr. Chadwell?
Yes.
Ms. Feller?
No.
Ms. Vessa?
Yes.
I'm going to vote yes. Mr. Math?
Yes.
Mr. Moses?
Absolutely not.
Comment?
Sure. Well, let me just, so we have it for the record. So the motion to postpone passed 4-3, which moves this item to our next regular board meeting. Mr. Math.
Madam President, I would recommend a recess.
Yes. I think Mr. Math wanted to say one thing, and then.
I was just going to recommend something quickly. We said next regular scheduled board meeting, but I'd like to look at other options that are a little bit closer than May 28th.
Okay. And I'm sure we can come back and maybe re-vote on that. But I do know that there were at least 2 requests for a little bit of a recess. So if we could, it is, what time is it? 7:43. Can we be back at 7:50, please? We'll take a break then. All right.
We got a majority. Let's go.
Let's go.
Okay. Let's, I guess let's go back to E3 and the local policy. I know Mason had a couple things. I don't know if you want to go over, Mason, some of your concerns.
Well, and I wouldn't even say, I mean, there weren't, I mean, some of these changes that I'll go through, Madam President, I'll share with you, some are just point of clarification, just trying to get a little bit more understanding of intent. And really, in some places, just, like I think I've said in the U, is add a belt where there's already suspenders. So I don't view these as significant changes, as more of trying to rather define some things. And Doug, I'm going to lean on you, because when I spoke to you about this, some of this was just, it really was like, is this legal? Is this not legal? Just trying to get some clarification. And so the first, as you go down, I'll just take them in order. Under the creating a new topic, as it currently reads, it says new topic threads should relate to past, present, future agenda items. Those items a trustee wishes to add to an agenda or other open meetings discussions. So the changes that I would recommend there is to go future agenda items or those items upcoming on the student outcomes monitoring calendar, and then strike the part where it talks about trustee wishes to add an agenda or other financial or other open meetings discussions. And I strike those for really this main reason, is that one is two real reasons. One is as far as adding agenda items, we have a process for that. We bring it up at the end of the meeting. We kind of able to say, hey, is this something we want to talk about? People's heads can nod, they can comment, and we can get some agreement that this is a future agenda item. It kind of lets everybody know, whether it be the board, staff, community, that now they can see this topic likely coming up on the message board. Just kind of give a heads up as a group before we start posting things and wonder where it came from. And then the one that we talked about were other official open meetings discussions, I just felt was very, very broad. So just trying to really narrow this down to things that are either on our agendas, on our outcomes monitoring calendar, or things that we as a board have agreed are upcoming on an agenda. So just trying to make sure it stays focused on those things, and we don't just, for example, get off on tangents of, this example I used with you, that I think the turf at Kelly Reeve could be blue. We don't get off on those. I know that's an extreme example. We don't get off on those kind of things and just stay focused on student outcomes and items on our agenda.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a problem with that. My only pushback that I said to Mason was that, just coming up with items that I was hoping to bring up on an agenda, but I'm happy to wait and do it at a meeting and then have it be part of the message board, if that's what makes everyone else more comfortable. And I guess just jump in if you have thoughts. Wait, Corey, you muted yourself. And then Amber, you can be next.
I just want to make sure that we have enough flexibility, because I can tell you, there's so much stuff I would have liked to have shared with the board in terms of my research this last month, so much information about the virus, and just share articles. And I just want to make sure that we have the flexibility to use it for that, even if, something might not be on the agenda just yet, but it's just so relevant to the function of our district going forward.
Well, and I like the idea of sharing the articles, but I don't like the idea of trustees doing the interpretation of the articles. If it's just something that, like on coronavirus, that you think is very relevant to what we're talking about, and you share that, I'm okay with that. But us chiming in and giving our opinions, I don't like that.
Well, and we'll get to that.
Except on page 3, it does say no links or attachments.
Yeah, that's what I was. And I will tell you, that was just an initial. I know that Chad brought that up and Mason brought that up also. That was kind of a cybersecurity thing when we had the whole group together, especially just as we rolled out. I know Jenny and her team were worried about if we were linking to Google Docs that might be able to be changed, and Clarence was worried about linking to sites not part of ours. that, would be part of our open records. He would just prefer, as we roll it out and do it for the first time, you would say, I saw in Texas Monthly this page, this article maybe, or cut and paste, so that we're not linking to outside sources.
But yeah, so, and Amy, I appreciate your comment about, and really the goal that just waiting and say at a board meeting really is just to make sure everybody's aware of what's going to be posted and coming up on there as an agenda item versus it just being put out there. Because the last thing we want is for somebody to say, hey, I would like to have this on an agenda. Well, somebody in the public may think that's going to be on an agenda, and then not people don't agree it needs to be on an agenda, and we never talk about it, and it creates confusion. So
and it's also one of those things we could update too. If it turns out that maybe that's hampering us and we are really all using it, this is our local policy. I think the group that got together to really work on this was just very conservative in their approach. And so I think that, to Corey's point, that would have been a part of our budget conversation, maybe, to talk about some of those statistics. So it would have been part of something on that agenda.
And then I'll just kind of keep going. And then on the next paragraph,
Mason, can you point a little bit more? It's hard to hear. I'm hearing about it.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
That's right. Thank you.
Let's turn this way.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to move this document over here where I can actually read it as I go. It'll make it look better.
I can hear you fine when you're pointing toward your computer. Thank you.
Great. So then on the paragraph below that, it talks about two-way communication with parents and community members. I just added other trustees and the superintendent, just making it clear that this is really not to replace two-way communication with anybody, because somebody could interpret that it's not to replace it with parents and community members, but it is meant to replace it with other trustees and the superintendent. So just making it clear, kind of put us all on the same page. And then going down, we just talked about the links, got clarification there. I'm going to make sure I can see it. I think it's I appreciate, Amy, you talking about the need to verify information before we put it out there, because it is very dangerous to put out stats and figures regarding, especially in this type of day and age with coronavirus. You don't want to think you have right stats and not verify them, put them out there and cause.
And I will say I took that one right from City of Austin, so they try to have that be part of theirs as well.
Amber, do you have a question? Sorry, I'm not sure. Amber's hand was right.
So the first thing I want to say is this was the whole thing that I was asking for in our discussion on the message board. Back in, it feels like years ago now after all this coronavirus stuff, but to be able to have a policies and procedures in place before we activated it. So I really appreciate the time and work that's gone into create this. The one thing that really stood out for me is there are several times in here where it mentions full board. And I just wanted to see if that should say a quorum, or if a full board implies that all 7 members must be present. But especially back at the page 6 where it talks about suspension of the message board, it says that the full board must vote on this. If the full board determines the message board is being used, the full board will need to vote to reactivate the message board. So legally, I don't know if full board means all 7 people or if it means a quorum.
That's a Doug question, because it really, what we were trying to make sure we did is that all board members on the message board are treated equally. So.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. It's actually a question I raised before, and I think the simplest thing to do is to make it a quorum of the board. We can make that change, but the only part where I would say we should make it the full board is that this is an all-in kind of tool. So no one trustee can be kept from using it. It's available to all trustees. If you get into a trouble of some kind that you find that this tool is not to your liking, then suspending it would be across the full board, no exceptions. But with regard to making certain decisions, I think it's just simpler And I agree that we ought to just make that clear that it's a quorum of the board.
Okay.
And
Amy,
can we keep going on my changes or?
Well, Chad, did you have a question? Because
maybe both of you mentioned. Explain again. I know you did, Amy, to me, but the suspension the night of the election. What is the reasoning behind that for the public to know?
Yeah, and Mason. Yeah, Mason's question too. So I that is one that came actually from Mark Kanye on Jenny's staff. He was concerned that as we got to election, well, not necessarily election day, not on that November 2nd Tuesday after the first Monday, is that if someone lost the election, then they would still have access to the message board and they could post things that would then be part of our official record. And so he had just asked if there was a way to, and he didn't want to be asked to have to take stuff down because that's not going to be legal once it's already posted. So what we sort of came to an agreement on is that we could just suspend the whole message board. No trustee could post from that morning, assuming, we don't know who's won or lost the election at that point. And then when all the new people are sworn in, it would open back up once everybody had their emails and was ready to go after they'd been trained. But that's where Doug is talking about. It has to be all or nothing. We couldn't say just trustees up for election are suspended or just somebody who didn't win is suspended. It has to be all or nothing. So that was our kind of compromise for staff.
Yeah, I'm fine with all that. I think whenever I read it, my point of clarification was, did election day mean that first Tuesday in November, or did it mean when early voting starts? That's the only thing I was trying to get clear.
And I think what we'll do there is insert a parenthetical to explain what election day means, and that it would be the election date that like November 2nd. So we'd say, as an example, the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November of an even numbered year, as an example.
So does that answer?
I say that as an example because if you were to have a special trustee election, to fill a slot, we wouldn't want to have to keep coming back and revising what election day means. So it's meant to be the one day that everyone associates with the election, not the early voting period.
Or a special election for this is election for trustees. It's not election for bond or something like that.
No, no, sir. Just trustees.
Amber, does that answer your question? Okay.
I'm okay. I'm okay with it as it is. I just think that there's so much that can be said on Facebook and Twitter that is not an official record. So I understand your reasoning. Once you type something in this message board, you can't take it down. From what I understand, it's just like when we're on the dais right now. Whatever we say, this is an official record, so we can't violate any open records, FERPA, anything like that. So I don't know why it would be any different there, but if that's what I don't know how much I'll be using it, but I'm okay with it if that gets it going.
Yeah, and really it was just for Mark's benefit, and I thought it was a really valid concern that he had, and
realistically, any trustee, anytime through the year, even before that, could get in trouble.
They could, and hopefully we'll all be responsible adults.
Okay. Well, we said we would try this for a while, and then we decide.
Well, I think Mason had another. Did you had one more? I think.
Just two more, really. But one is really, I guess, two more potential changes, and one just kind of point of clarification. One is just on the prohibited practices, making sure it's clear that saying personal matters, including the superintendent's evaluation. Making sure that's clear that that's included in that. And then the next, I'll kind of combine them together because one is just the logistics of the FERPA, because obviously if that does occur, time matters. And so making sure we're moving deliberately there to assess if there was a violation, if we think there might have been, get it down, taken properly. And then if we define that it's not, we put it back up. And then, and Doug, this is what I spoke to you about. We can have some dialogue to make sure this is, what is and is not allowable. But when I talked about no deleting of content and it mentioned the FERPA, I asked the question if that could include closed session items, and it may not, but I do think it's important for us to discuss just the ramifications of posting closed session items, specifically if it has to deal with safety and security, personnel issues, the purchase of real property, those kind of things, even if it's just accidental commenting that, hey, what's the update on our purchase of blank property? Well, we just showed our hand and we can't take it back. So if we can't delete those for legal reasons, I think it's important just for us all to make sure we're very conscientious of if we have an inkling that it might be a closed session item or not certain, to make sure we reached out to Dr. Flores, Doug, Sandra, the appropriate person, and asked that before.
Yeah, so I think we're clearly justified in inserting FERPA.
Go and post that on the message.
Sorry, I stepped on what you were saying.
Well, I think he just froze a little bit, so.
So the FERPA language is in there because this is a state law, and state law does not trump federal law, and federal law under FERPA requires us to not disclose personally identifiable information of students. So I think the state law doesn't address this directly, but I think we can rationalize this process because we're trying to respect federal law that is a higher authority on the disclosure of information. With regard to I think the very legitimate issues that Mason's raising about confidential information coming out of a closed session or confidential information period being posted on here. We've got, I would say, I think it's a legitimate suggestion, one that probably merits a little bit more discussion, perhaps in a closed session with the board, which is a whole other kettle of fish. But I would say, I think I'm very comfortable, definitely, with the FERPA rational reasoning that I've just described. And I would just say that if we want to pursue the suggestion that Mason's proposed, we probably should reserve some time in a closed session, if possible, to have that kind of conversation, just to kind of walk through what that would look like.
Yeah, I think when I responded to, there's Sandra. Sorry.
I was gonna just chime in and say that is exactly right. I agree with him. I also want to remind everybody that there's a state law that prohibits the discussion of revealing of the information related to personnel evaluations, certain personnel evaluations, which I think goes to Mason's point as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that was a really good thing to specify and add in there. We just took that list from, I'm not even sure where we grabbed that list from. Because I think Doug and Sandra, the only thing that I was worried about is we might be able to pull stuff that should have been enclosed, but that's something people could challenge.
Yeah, that's the kind of conversation that I was thinking we would be better to have in a closed session.
Exactly.
I wouldn't do it now. I don't think we need to discuss that now, but
okay.
I think if you want to go down that road, I encourage us to do that in a closed session.
Yeah, and if not, and look, I put that change in there really just to get this conversation going for that reason, just to make sure that and highlight the seriousness of even accidentally posting something, because it really could create some serious issues for the district, whether it is purchasing property or personnel, or any other or legal matters for that issue.
So, I mean, I guess it just occurred to me, if we go back and say something, I mean, because we've said we can only be talking about things on the agenda, but maybe if we even clarify one more time at the beginning that it's on the open sessions of the agenda, would that make you feel better, Mason?
Oh, I think that helps a lot. So I appreciate that.
So open session agenda items. Okay. All right. Well, did anyone else have any other?
I've got a couple of
Okay.
maybe questions. On page 6 of 6, second paragraph, when it talks about trustees misusing the message board, I think maybe it says regular board meeting. So once again, it would have to be a situation where you would have to address that issue at the regular board meeting.
Oh, so do you want to take that word out and just say the next board meeting?
Right, because I think we just had that pitfall just a minute ago.
Okay.
And then one other question.
May I interrupt and suggest that instead of saying next board meeting, maybe at a future board meeting, so that way, if the next meeting is a called meeting for a specific purpose, you may not want to take this up, but you would be able to put it on an agenda for a future meeting, which is generally how things like that are handled.
Is that okay with you, Nikki? If we just for a future meeting? Okay.
And I think it's on page 1 or 2 down at the bottom. I, of course, can't find it now. When it talks about LSG, that's kind of confusing to me. First off, when you're reading that, like, how are people going to know what LSG are? What that is even? And I'm trying to see the correlation of how it ties into that.
On that whole paragraph?
Yes. Well, specifically where it makes reference to LSG.
So you're saying we should maybe spell that out and not use acronyms?
Yeah, I guess spell it out, but also why, like, I'm trying to figure out why that's in there.
That was actually a request, I think from the board, that maybe even Mason, that we make it clear that we still, or maybe Drew, I'm not sure, that regular board meetings still be the focus, that we don't use the message board to supplant that discussion at regular board meetings.
I don't know. It just, in 5 years, are we going to be doing LSG?
Just take that. Bless you, Mason. Should we just maybe just take that sentence out and say the message board should be used primarily?
I think so, because when I was reading, it was a good flow, and then I got to that, and I was like, wait a minute.
Okay.
Or I was going to say just take out LSG and results on board goals, because even LSG could be a different acronym in 3 years.
Okay, so change, leave it in, but change should focus on progress and results of board goals.
Yes.
And constraint. Well, do we want to say constraints or just board goals, period?
Board goals, period.
Goals. Yeah. Constraints are.
Constraints are a part of the board goals. I mean,
they are for LSG. They, I guess I would think they are kind of part of goals, and if it's not continued through future boards, then constraints doesn't really make sense.
And one other comment, when this goes live, are we going to have a purpose statement, like why this board is being used, explaining to people what it is exactly? I think it needs some sort of introduction or purpose statement.
And there is something on there, and I think Mark, we could probably see if we could talk to Jenny. She's on here.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to, but that's something that Mark had sent. I know he sent me sort of what the template looks like on the front, and
we don't really have a purpose or mission statement. We sort of, it's a kind of just a description statement of what it is and what it's being used for. I think we borrowed a lot of language from Travis County and City of Austin. We can certainly draft something more substantial for board review, or we could always do a web post that goes live with more of almost like a story, either. But probably having it on the page itself would be better because then it's always there.
Right. I can't, I don't know. Doug, do you remember? Because I think, Jenny, you weren't at the last meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I can see if I can find it while you discuss.
Asking me, Amy?
Well, I know I was asking Jenny. She's going to look for it real quick because there was some just simple wording, based on state law, this is what this board is going to be used for. And I think, Mason, we even put on, it's not mandatory and that sort of thing. But it was very simple. I think it was just a couple sentences that Mark had.
And I've got one more question.
Sure, go.
On page 5 of 6, down at the very bottom, it says the superintendent may choose to designate an employee to review post as needed. I know the word may was used, but it almost sounds like a directive. Some people don't distinguish well between may and shall. I know the legality of it. Just kind of bothered me.
So may is a choice.
Right. I get it.
So we can say, if you want, though, we can say can choose to, if that you think that makes it clear to.
I think
clear.
if we could make it clear.
Okay, can choose to.
Okay.
Yeah, I think because that was just, we didn't want to add to the burden to staff. And so we didn't want to make it mandatory.
Right. I just want to make sure it doesn't sound like a directive.
Yeah.
Will that be posted though? Are they going to look at everything before it gets posted?
No, because it's owned by the board. It's just, it's his choice. And it'll probably be whatever's easier for staff. So if Corey sends Dr. Audix her list of questions, if we've got a thread going and he would prefer just to answer for the whole board, I would assume Dr. Flores would give him that opportunity to just do it that way. Not that Corey ever has questions about the budget, but okay, so I found the email. So right now, I think it just says, pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.006, the Round Rock ISD Board of Trustees established this online message board to facilitate board communication. Only trustees and authorized staff members may post on the online message board. Use by trustees is not mandatory. The online message board is viewable and searchable by the public. The Board of Trustees will not vote or take action on the message board. All votes will occur during properly posted meetings of the Round Rock ISD Board of Trustees.
Okay.
So it's sort of just a pretty simple explanation.
No, I think that's good.
Okay. All right. I keep looking down and making notes, so I'm not seeing if anyone had their hands up. Nope. All right. So if there's no other comments, I will make these changes and work with Doug and get them back out to you, so that we can hopefully do a second reading and approval pretty quickly. All right. So now we'll go to action. No, not action. We're going to G, action items for consideration by consent. And I know there's quite a few, and I know Corey has a question. Dr. Flores, did you have anything to say about any of these? You're muted, sir.
Most apply to Terry, so anything that we have on these, Terry's on, so he's ready, he's prepared.
Corey, did you want to ask your question real quick?
Yes, my question is regarding number 4. Oh, I'm sorry, it's number 3 for the approval of the guaranteed maximum price for elementary 35. My first question is, this is the guaranteed maximum price, so it doesn't mean that that's actually going to be the price, right?
Guaranteed maximum price, Trustee Vessa, is a price that is provided for or stated for construction that is guaranteed not to ever be exceeded by the builder. The builder is taking the risk to build that project for that price or less.
Okay. So I had asked you some questions about how much it cost for our last elementary school and what the cost was for this elementary school. And then I didn't go into like the question of, well, why is there a discrepancy? But I thought that would be a really important thing for our constituents to understand why there's actually a really big price discrepancy. So I just felt like having that on record would be informative because it is really large.
These two projects, you're referring to Jolie Johnson Elementary School and, of course, the new Elementary 35. They are separated by approximately 5.5 years of extraordinary prosperity in this region. And so you're seeing very, very substantial escalations in prices from the era of 2015 to this era of 2020.
Can you just clarify the difference in the prices there?
The construction cost, the GMP price for Elementary 35 is $38 million. And the construction price accomplished in that era of 2015 was about $28 million.
Are you sure that it was 38 million? I thought you said something different to me before, but I might be wrong.
Yes, and you have to keep your units correct in that you have construction, which is a hard cost, and the soft costs related to that. And so there are hard costs and soft costs related to construction.
Okay, because like your response to my question said 48 million point 155 or $488,155,000 was the bond estimate.
That is a total bond price. That includes all costs, soft and hard cost.
Yeah, what we're voting on, Corey, if you look in board docs, the amount is $38,330,210.
Okay. Well, thank you. I just really wanted just to have on record so that people could understand why there was a difference.
Very good.
Mr. Moses.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the board adopt items G1 through G12 by consent.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to approve items G1 through 12 by consent. We'll go down in order again. Ms. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Mr. Chadwell?
Aye.
Ms. Feller? Aye. Ms. Vessa?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Math?
Aye.
And Mr. Moses?
Aye.
All right, so our consent items pass 7-0. And now we are to H1, board announcements, requests for future agenda items. Mr. Chadwell.
Go ahead, Corey.
You want me to go first? Okay. So I'd like for us to have some data in our next board meeting about how online instruction's going. How are we doing in terms of engagement of our students? How many students are logging in regularly? Are they doing the assignments? Are the kids who've received a Chromebook actually using the Chromebook? How are other things that I'd like for us to discuss is how are we addressing the needs of kids in special ed and with 504s? And then do we have any lessons learned for our first few weeks of online learning? And can we expect to see any changes based on those lessons learned?
Actually, that kind of goes to mine too. I'll just jump in real quick because I know I saw Chad and Mason, but I was going to see, I know that Dr. Flores, we kind of talked about me and Jenny and Kathy getting together and trying to come up with a framework so the board could start, like the TEA had said, set up your emergency priorities and get that type of information like Corey asked. So we haven't had a chance yet, but I'm wondering if maybe we want to set up a board workshop for the whole board to give their input on what information they would like to get back and not just me. Is that something?
Yeah, that's not a problem. In fact, we've got a great story to tell. So I've got staff. I think you sent that email with a lot. I mean, from the TASB recommendation, or was it TASB or TEA?
TEA, yeah.
Yeah, TEA. And so I sent that in board update as well. So that's something staff's working on. But I will tell you right now, there's other things they're working on as they get from phase 1 to phase 2. But at the same time, it's we've got a great story to tell. And if we can get more solid information out there, there's a lot of misinformation out there as well. So as soon as we can get all that, we're definitely working on it. So again, I'm proud of staff. So we'll work on, that's why I've got also Jenny and Kathy Malerba, Dr. Malerba working to specifically get those kind of things that we need so that we can have a full summary report. And that's fine.
I'm curious, do we want to do it sooner rather than waiting into May? Is that the kind of thing we want to get out to the public?
I think May 4th, I mean, we've got it's already April 15th. What is it?
Yeah.
Today? It's going by so fast. I think for us, rather than rushing it, I'd like to give staff, I don't know, y'all haven't decided on the PIB meeting. I know there's some other things there, but maybe a full meeting, but that would be a good opportunity for us to on May 4th. That gives us plenty of time and gives, because tomorrow we will be paying attention, obviously, to what the governor says and how we move forward with, we've got to make some decisions with graduation and some other things. And so allow us to focus on that next week. And then after that, we'll be glad to include that probably as early as May 4th.
Okay. Hold on, Amber. We're going to, go ahead.
It's on the same topic of that stuff. Will we have a list of what's going to be reported ahead of time? Because I have some concerns or questions and clarifications about specifically special education and things like that on this online learning. And so will the trustees be able to voice our questions before?
Oh yeah, that'd be good. That'd be helpful actually. So yeah.
Okay.
I've got Kathy and Jenny working on that.
Okay. I'll connect with them. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think I saw Mr. Chadwell, if you had some.
A couple of things. One is mainly, and I'm glad you brought that up, both of you, Corey and Amy, on the results. And as I said earlier, I know that there's been a lot of work done, and I appreciate all that. People are sending us emails. I'm seeing things posted online saying the work's too hard, it's not hard enough, and otherwise. But I know you'll get that worked out. So I would like to see, though, that which relates to the other topic, which is the city of Austin, or Austin ISD, is having trouble finding several thousand of their students, last I heard. Has Round Rock, is there any validation, which goes back to the email I sent right after we did the boundary redraw, which had to do with verifying where students actually live. And so we were talking about Caraway and how many students live there. And I made a comment, I don't think that's a whole lot, but as I did send an email to you, Dr. Flores, copied you, Amy, and then Mason as well, about the policy, which is the enrollment. And Dr. Flores, you mentioned earlier about open enrollment. It all kind of fits into all of that together. So first of all, I'd like to know, do we have a location on all the students? Are there any that are not found? You said there might be some students that are missing, Chromebooks, or do they need them? I'd like to be able to do that. And that fits in with the whole verification of residency and the feeder patterns. So as time goes on, I realize that there's a lot of topics that are being discussed right now, but that, again, it kind of fits into what both Corey and Amy said earlier. How many students are logging in? How many have Chromebooks? Are they using them? Things like that. So, and then I look forward to seeing the governor's statements tomorrow. And then kind of to Doug, I don't need an answer right now. Maybe you and I can talk offline tomorrow or something. But closed session, how could we do a closed session using Zoom here and Skype? So we need to discuss.
Let me just answer that real quick, just for the sake. So you can schedule a meeting to have a closed session going forward if you want, and then we just have to use an alternate number that only the board members and designated staff and so forth can use, so that we don't have third parties listening in. So there is a process for that if you need it.
All right, thank you. That's all I had. Thank you.
And Mason, did you?
Yeah, thanks, Madam President. Just kind of what you and I did a little quick back and forth on, just saying that, yeah, I think that doing the PIB meeting as a general board workshop for the budget is, in these times, very advisable. So I think whatever, give me the exact date, but if we can pin that down as a workshop date, that'd be good. And I also want to give a shout out, I know, to Ryan Smith and Mandy and their team, because I know that they put a lot of work in on this, and they're working out some of the finer details to continue to improve it and make it more usable for parents and students. I know as a quick shout out, as a parent of an elementary school, a couple of people, they went from like a couple of different apps to one app, and that changed the world. So thank you so much to them for doing that. And then just lastly, I wanted to implore us to go back and revisit. I can't make the motion. Obviously, I was on the losing side. Implore us to revisit that date. We did something where staff said we put them in a very bad position where they cannot get stuff done if we wait 6 weeks. And that is putting our staff in a position where not just our main staff, our teachers, where they can't make budget decisions at their own self because they don't know what they might get as a salary increase or not. Even if we're telling them it's nothing, just we need to give clarity and let people plan. And waiting 6 weeks is, as they all know, I do not think it's the right decision. And I'm just asking that we revisit that and make a decision for our staff.
And, actually, I had written that down as we were talking, that whenever we did come back the next time, we could easily do a motion to reconsider and then redo.
We can do it right now.
It would be helpful. I mean, it would, because one of the things that I was late coming back after the recess because I was with Kenneth, and I really didn't get an answer because I had to come down back to the office to this meeting. But I asked Kenneth, and he was putting a pencil with his staff. He was on the phone. I just said, hey, he goes, I'm just trying to make so we can finalize our budget. He goes, I don't know if it's possible. So I left him with that. I'd like to hear from Dr. Audix if it's okay. I know this is items for agenda, but I think it's right on point. So, and
right, so we had during break talk with Annette and then talk with Sarah and Rhonda from my side, and with the timeline that the board is operating from, bottom line, if it's like we'd rather you tell us that there's going to be no raise tonight because we physically couldn't process a raise. If y'all didn't say it until the night of the 28th, because we've got a post by June 11th, and there's no way to go from, a Friday to a week and a half later. All the information's got to, literally 3 different teams has got to do it. Annette's got to do it. Then accounting's got to do it. Payroll and benefits all have to review and do their portion and be perfect, in that short amount of time frame. So if that's truly, I'd rather y'all just say, if that's truly, hey, we won't be comfortable, and then till then to make a decision on an increase, I'd rather you just tell us tonight that there is no increase because the work's still got to get done, and we wouldn't physically be able to process a pay raise on that short amount of time frame.
Can we do the right, please?
The motion has to come from the winning side.
I thought we made a vote earlier. This is agenda item request. I think you're supposed to make a quick summary announcements. I requested a 2 week delay for the 30th or the 4th. And I'd like to stick with that, but
Well, actually, the way it stands right now, Chad, is that we said when Mason called the question, it was the next regular board meeting, which is at the end of May. So you were on the winning side. So if you would like to make a motion to reconsider and use May 4th as the date that we look at this again, we can do that.
Okay, I'm making a motion that we reset it for May 4th, which is a Monday. Is that right?
So you want to make a motion to reconsider the item and then make a separate motion about what it is you want to do. So first, is there a majority? We have to determine whether there's a majority to support reconsidering the item. So the first motion would be a motion to reconsider by one of the four on the prevailing side.
So Chad's made that motion. Anyone can second.
Second.
I have a question about it. So when we make a motion to reconsider, then are we back to like this whole argument over like, well, I move that we vote on it right now, like, or is it just a date issue? Like,
All I said was the date.
Yeah.
So there was a motion to reconsider.
Can we do that, Doug?
So when a motion, yeah. So let me explain. When you make a motion to reconsider, you're looking to potentially undo the action that was taken before. But it doesn't mean that you will. You may try to reconsider it and not come to an agreement on anything. And so what the last action was will stand, which was the next regular board meeting scheduled for the end of May. So if you want to reconsider that, for purposes of seeing if you can come up with an alternate date, you can do that. But right now you have an action.
My question is, are we just talking about the date?
Yes.
Like, okay, we cannot reconsider because I made a motion to postpone and it passed. And now can we just reconsider? Can his reconsideration just be of the date?
That's all I'm
Well,
requesting.
I think ultimately the majority will decide that. And that's how whatever the vote is on that.
Okay, so the motion is that we will reconsider and we will postpone until the item and postpone until May 4th.
Well, I would actually, just in case something happens, can't we just say a future meeting and then we can determine the best, what if we can't even have a quorum for May 4th? It wasn't even supposed to be a general meeting. So I don't know. I'm just giving us flexibility.
Do we have to put a date, Doug?
No, it's your motion, so you could say the next meeting of the board.
Or a future meeting.
Right. Doug, I think
a future meeting.
I want to help and make this be parliamentary correct. I think first there has to be, we already have a motion and a second on the motion reconsider, the vote by which.
Right. Okay.
So we need to first do that. Then we come back to the item, and Corey, I get your concern. I'll tell you this, I wish we would take action tonight. I think we should do a raise, but I can tell right now the board isn't comfortable with that. But if it at least moves it up a few weeks, that's a heck of a lot better than the end of May. I mean, I wish we take action, but that does not seem to be the will of at least 4 board members at this time.
Okay. Doug, if I can do it legally and say amend my motion to say at our next call meeting.
It has to be
Chad.
Okay, I move to amend the motion, the date.
Chad.
Yes.
Let me just chime in.
Okay.
First, make a motion to reconsider the item, and that's it. Not talking about date. And then it'll be a second motion about the date.
I make a motion to reconsider the item we discussed earlier.
And I believe I second that.
Okay.
Now we need to vote on it.
Okay. Can we just raise our hand and say aye?
I can see everybody. Can everybody see each other?
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, so we've now made the motion to reconsider. So now, Chad.
Okay. I move to set the date May 4th.
To postpone the vote until May 4th.
Yes. Is that legal, Doug?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second for May 4th?
Okay.
Corey, you're muted.
I'd rather give more time, but somebody else can second it.
So what kind of time are you looking for?
I think May 14th is a good date. Two weeks is not a lot of time.
2 weeks is a lot of time on someone planning a budget in their career. Yes, 2 weeks is a long time.
Well, I mean,
I have to make this decision. I'm the one accountable ultimately. So, and I'm one person, and certainly I am one person. The earliest I want to consider this is May 14th.
Okay, so I made a motion. There's no second. So
Corey, do you want to make a motion now, or Mason?
If that's where we're back to, then I'm going to go back and make my motion that we, my original one. Sorry, I'm going back to that. I gotta get it. No, get off that. Then I'm going to go back and make my original motion.
No.
That the Board of Trustees approve the adoption of the 2021.
We were only reconsidering the vote of the date. I was
made a motion.
trying to avoid that.
I know, Corey.
Specifically.
Hold on, Corey. So
you could have seconded the motion, and it would have been. But I don't think we should wait. And I've made my motion now. I wasn't going to say anything until that motion died.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second now for the going back to the 2% raise.
I don't want to do this.
Once you voted on something.
But this is not.
The motion to reconsider. Corey,
call
you can
the
make.
question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Corey, do you want to make your? I mean, we can call the question. Let me see what the. I think that has to be a 2/3 vote, but.
She does.
I would just like to redo the motion to say May 14th, that we would postpone the vote on the compensation plan until May 14th.
When we know that staff will have to jump through hoops to do that. Let's make it just as hard as possible.
Okay. So do we have a second for Corey's motion?
But I called the question.
Okay, so let's take a 2/3 vote if we're going to vote on.
To call the question requires a 2/3 vote.
Yeah. So how many people is 2/3 of 7? It's 5 people. Are 5 people ready to vote on Mason's motion?
It's so funny. We never called the vote on any other motion when someone has called the question.
You know what? I'm literally. We have like 5 motions going, and I'm looking at what David Kompel gave me, and calling the question takes a 2/3 vote.
You make
I don't even know what we're calling the question on.
voted on calling the question before.
What calling it
But
on?
if there isn't a 2/3 vote, then the discussion continues. And there was a motion that the last thing that happened was a motion by Corey to make it for May 14th.
I'll second that. I don't know why we just can't say a future date. So if the governor tomorrow makes a statement and we say, what happens if the governor makes a statement tomorrow and we say, we want to meet next Thursday? I'd like to be able to meet next Thursday.
Well, then let's meet next Thursday.
Well, I mean, so right now,
There's a second motion that was seconded on
Yes.
postponing to the 14th. That's the same
And that's-
process we went through here.
right, and so it's a 6. It goes in order.
Yeah.
So
you take that
now
motion.
we have a motion and a second to postpone until May 14th.
Dr.
2 weeks
Flores,
before
Alex,
this.
does that help y'all at all? Does this really solve the issue?
I defer to Dr. Oddix and his staff. I mean, I'd love to say yes, but Dr. Oddix, I'm going to defer to you. What time do we need to have if we go? And I think, let me be clear. I think Dr. Oddix said, if y'all vote and it says no, 0%, we're fine. I said it, I think earlier, if y'all do that, it just gives us the clarity we need. But what the question is, how much time, Dr. Oddix, the 14th, will that work? May 14th.
Yeah, I mean, what's hard on that is that's like asking a question where I've got to answer for 3 different teams, one of which is a player, that just got here and we're fixing to lose a staff member tomorrow. So it's sort of like, how close to the edge of the mountain can you come without falling off the decide. So, hey, from our end, the more time you give us, the more comfort there is to be giving you an accurate budget that reflects whatever we do to all the employees and set yourself up to have the right accounting and stuff done. The less time we have, the more, just like anything, if you rush, there's more chance for error. And on the May 28th, that was literally, that's absolutely not just physically can't do it. And the answer there is simply, we couldn't do that. So let's just agree to nothing so that we can process that through.
And from our perspective, I mean, here's the thing. We want to do whatever's best for our staff. And we definitely can't do May 28th. Like you said, that's physically impossible. May 14th makes it hard too. I mean, May 4th would certainly be easier. But we're at the will of the board.
Well, the motion and the second was for May 14th.
I'd like to go back to the 4th then again. I made a motion for that, but I didn't get a second. I don't know if anybody's interested in redoing that. Corey, I don't know if you'd want to amend your motion to the 4th.
Corey, could we amend yours to the 7th so that it's on the Thursday instead of the Monday of May 4th? May 4th was just the PIB meeting. Could we do the 7th?
We can compromise and say the 7th.
I second that.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to postpone the vote until May 7th. All right, let's just, Nikki, Ms. Gonzalez.
We can't do it any sooner than that. Why can't we do it on the 4th?
Why can't we do it tonight?
We got a motion for the 7th.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now the 7th is sort of our in-between. It's a Thursday. It's a normal day when we might have had as opposed to a Monday. And
no.
Okay.
Aye. Yes.
Ms. Feller? I couldn't hear you, Amber. Did you? No. Okay.
Sorry. No.
Ms. Vessa?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. Mr. Math?
Yes.
Mr. Moses?
Nay.
All right. So we have the motion to postpone until May 7th. And if that's 4-3. So can we then, as a future agenda item, move the PIB meeting to May 7th? And we'll do everything on May 7th as opposed to the May 4th?
I'm not sure it needs to even be called the PIB meeting. I mean.
Right. So we have a budget meeting and then talk about the TEA recommendations on the 7th. And then Amber and Chad, if you have issues that you want, or anybody, let Jenny and Kathy know. Is that correct, Dr. Flores?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything, any other new business, any other actual future agenda items?
I would love an update on our seniors. I know this is especially trying for everybody, but exponentially for our seniors. So an update for as much as you can give us. I get that everything's changing on a daily basis, but as a mom of a senior and President Weir, mom of a seniors, to add an S on that, some clarification, especially for our seniors.
No doubt. We were holding out. I mean, what we want to be able to do is give as much clarity as possible, and I think tomorrow is going to give us an opportunity to make some headway along that route with the governor's conference and everything else. And we know Austin's done that, with what they made announced for seniors. So I think everybody collectively in the area is close to that, and I think tomorrow's we'll definitely be on it.
Thank you, Dr. Flores. I know it's the number one question I get in my own house. So,
yeah. No doubt.
All right. I'm kind of exhausted. It is 8:53. If there is nothing else, we don't have anything for closed. I would say, unless there's any objections, this meeting is adjourned at 8:53.
Good night, everybody.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.